Since Knights and Merchants Remake was invented, the siege weapons were condemned because they were too good. But a unit like the Warrior, who was the master of deception, making everyone think that he had more armor than his twin brother the Barbarian, as they were equal in every way. Or a character like the Rogue, whose main purpose seems to be to add comedy to the game, because 8 Knight is a death sentence for 100 of them. And the remake developers saw nothing wrong with adding a new building called the Market, which allows you to get away with making very stupid mistakes. And they found nothing wrong introducing a way to make it easier to cheat than ever before, including battle missions. Press F11, click this, click that, and press the V key. Now that's one hell of a speedrun. And for a game in which nostalgia is its middle name, is not allowed to identify as the game for which they are requiring you to purchase before you can play their remake. Not to mention that on KaM Discords, these weapons are talked about at least once a month, so why would it be so wrong to make cheating more difficult than what it already is, which is as easy as possible right now? If you are watching this video out of nostalgia from the past, of a game from your childhood, I have news for you after all. I have programmed the siege weapons into the game, but not in the way you would hope. But at this point, I'm sure you feel anything is better than nothing. For those who wanted to play a game that is as close to the vanilla remake as possible, that includes the siege weapons that so many people have been waiting for so long, and that the siege units are as close to the original game as it's ever been. Throughout the remaining of this video, I will once in a while have short videos where I study the interaction between the ballista and units or buildings that I can say with confidence that I put strong emphasis that the siege units that you have here are as close to the original game as possible. I'm a human, so I make mistakes and maybe I can't see everything, but I really tried, and so many things add up that I'm confident to say that if it's not exact, it's pretty close. Not only do my catapults sound very similar to the original game, but they throw 3 rocks like the original game. But with King Dairon's mod, you can see here they throw only 1, and that sound you heard was a sound effect for the catapults to launch. That's where that static alien type of sound effect is, and I'll talk about that later on in the video. Just imagine the possibilities if you could play a map like Invasion or Border of Life, you know, some of the really hard maps with siege units. I believe that's enough of an introduction. I have several minutes of video where it's just going to show some sample gameplay. After I show the footage, then I'm going to explain how to install the game. So without further ado, I'm proud to present my siege weapons. It costs 30 gold each.
Your troops are under attack.
And I'll probably say it again, but the siege weapon's health bar is going to reflect the number of hit points they have. Both the Ballista and the Catapult, I made them have 2 hit points. And I did that because the way the remake is, it kind of mimics how many hits they can take before they get killed. Instead of having this 100% green the entire time from when they're perfectly healthy, no hit points lost until they're dead, it's going to show 50%. So it's either going to show this or 50%, and then they're going to regenerate just like other units. So eventually, if they stop getting hit, this is going to go back to this.
Your troops are being attacked. Your troops are under attack. Your troops are being attacked. Your troops are being attacked. Your troops are being attacked.
Life slips away.
Ready! Gladly! Your command? Gladly! Get rid of them!
The first step to be able to play this, you have to go and get this. If you don't have the original game, either this or the Steam version, you need to go and buy it and install it on your computer and run it at least once. For the Steam version, you're going to have to literally run the Steam application. Like I have the Steam version here. If you were to run it from here, even though it's in the Steam apps, it's not going to count. You're going to have to run it through Steam at least one time. And then once you do, then I'll provide you a download link to the version of the game where you're going to download and install this after you've done that prerequisite. The remake should install here. I have other KaM Remake versions. It doesn't matter for you. You don't have to keep previous remake versions if you don't want to, but if you don't keep them, then you're not going to be able to play replays from older games. That's how it's always worked with remake updates. But anyway, if you come in here and you unzip the attachment I'm going to give you, then you're going to have this folder with some files in it. You're just going to drag that in here. And this too, both of them. That's all you have to do to install this. So you have to install the original game in order to be able to install the remake. Then once you have the remake, then you just add in my mod of the same game, which maybe you've noticed I added a 0 to the remake version number to distinguish this from that. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But throughout this video, for those who are going to watch it, you may not see that 0. I just decided to add this at the last minute. But anyway, in these files here, just to tell you about it a little bit, there's a README. You can read that. It's nothing more than what I'm saying here, but developers, maybe you want to read that a little bit. But for developers, I've got something here for you. I've got a table of contents of the methods in the source code that I modified, and then the actual source code where it's expanded and you actually see the part of the functions and procedures that I modified in order to make this mod. That's all there is to it. It should run with all the game files that are already there for this version. And that's what I call the Town Hall Siege Units mod. When you first run, you might get this thing from Windows because it wants to modify the game settings folder, and I didn't change that. I didn't change anything with the game or anything about the game except for adding the siege units in. And that's your installation. This is made from R15379. This is that same game version. It's a long story, but the way the code in this game is written, I don't think the developers ever intended for people to add additional units to the game. If anything, they would allow you to substitute units in for other units. I exchanged the warrior and the rogue for the ballista and the catapult respectively. Let's take a look at Farmer's Wish. I don't know if you remember this map from a long time ago, but these were rogues. Well, now the rogues are actually converted to catapults, and the enemy that comes and attacks you, they come attack you with warriors and rogues, but now you can see that the warriors are ballistas. If anyone's wondering why I chose the rogue and the warrior, well, I asked on KaM Discord what's the least used town hall troop in games. The answer was the rogue. So that was one unit I definitely wanted to exchange. And then for the warrior, we can see that all of its specs here are identical to the barbarian. So the barbarian warrior. And because the barbarian was in the Shattered Kingdom, I thought that would be a better one to keep than a warrior that he looks like an iron armored troop that he's not. Everything you could do with the rogue and the warrior in previous remake versions, which means training from the town hall, creating with scripts, you name it, you can do with these siege weapons. The siege weapons are ranged units, obviously, so they're not going to be able to fight like the warrior, but I mean everything where the warrior is, wherever he could go, whatever he could do, now the ballista is going to be able to do. And the same with the rogue for the catapult. For those who script in this language, I have 2 new scripting functions here, creating just the siege units. If you want to create siege units with give siege group, then you just use 25 and 26 for the rogue and the warrior, where the rogue is the catapult and the warrior is the ballista. Give siege group EX, you would still use UT rogue and UT warrior. And for those wondering when I showed a Farmer's Wish earlier that it was siege weapons replace the rogues, well now it's just going to be bowmen. That's how it's going to work. I have bowmen to replace the rogues and barbarians to replace the warriors wherever they were. That way the maps are as close to what they were as possible, and there is absolutely no conflict between this mod and the default vanilla remake version that this can go with. They both can be in the same folder and run the same maps. This right here is Farmer's Wish run from the mod, of course, because they are bowmen now instead of rogues, and I'm opening up the default game in the same folder of Farmer's Wish. And now they're rogues, and they function exactly like rogues in every way. So map makers, you have nothing to worry about. The only problem is for map makers, you cannot put siege weapons. Even though it shows up here, you cannot put them. They're going to become these right away. you'd have to generate them with scripts only, or have them trained through the Town Hall with actions.house Town Hall equip or the EX version, whatever you want. That way this mod doesn't destroy any previous maps or any previous scripts. And again, the mod can be run and put into the same exact folder as the current vanilla remake version that it is made from. When you run it, it's going to create a saves SU folder, and if you have multiplayer saves, it's also going to create a multiplayer SU folder. That way the saves that are generated from the mod are not going to interfere with the ones from the default, and you can still have them both in the same folder with no problems. If you attempt to play a replay from either game into another, then you can't make a mistake, because as of me editing this video, I added this in. I appended a 0 to the current remake version's number that I created this from to distinguish the two, and so that's how it'll be for future updates. Should the remake developers not put the siege weapons in like I did, maybe even use my source code. If they don't do that and I have to keep putting it in, I'm just going to put a 0, distinguish them, but to make it clear which version it's from. But yeah, as normal, you'll see this, and it won't let you view it. But saves will be put in this folder to eliminate confusion. This one is icons. This is for the siege units to appear when you have total equipped, for example. In a replay, you can see the icons there. And again, even though it doesn't really matter, you can see them from the map editor, but they're going to become these when you click on them. If you try to make a map with them, you can't place them with the map editor. I originally had it that you could, but it would destroy every other map that existed before. If they had rogues and warriors in them, it would mess everything up. So that's how it has to be in order for this to be kept as simple, and you can interchangeably run maps between this mod and the current vanilla remake version that it is made from. My goal for replacing units was to ensure that this is the least intrusive way to do this, to add the siege units to the game, because there's so many moving parts, and when you want to add a new unit in, there's so many more files you would have to edit, at least from my current understanding, which is probably wrong. I hope it's wrong, but that's the way it looks. And I wanted this to be a stable release. Because I did it the way I did it, I swapped units for existing units based on how the remake developers coded this game. This is a sure way, or an almost sure way, it probably is a sure way, that there is no bugs. You can guarantee that if there's any bugs, it's because this remake version had bugs in it already. It's not my bugs. So this is a stable release, quote unquote, regarding my siege weapon functionality and not messing any other part of the game up. And as you can see here, they are being trained from the Town Hall instead of from the Siege Workshop. So not ideal, not exactly like the original game, but hopefully maybe you can play with this in multiplayer. And in co-op, people love the Town Halls. So this is going to offer them a way to not have to change their strategy. Not only was it convenient for me to not have to make the Siege Workshop, but it's also a way for them to not have to change their type of gameplay. But everyone has to have this mod if they want to try to play multiplayer and they have to set up a server. I think it should work, but if it doesn't, then I'm sorry, I don't know how to get that to work, and the KaM Remake developers are certainly not going to do it. They haven't added the siege weapons all this time. I feel so bad for so many people who wanted them in the game and they never got it in the game. And although there's exciting expansion for KaM Remake, it's so different than KaM Remake and actually KaM that it's not really the same nostalgic experience, in my opinion. It's like you're playing another game. I purposely made this video so that I and others can make these changes to future remake versions. And the way I'm going to provide the source code in the video description, it should be pretty simple to modify the updated version's code so that we can keep the siege units in the remake indefinitely. Should it just be people like us on the side who are not the official KaM Remake developers. But who knows, maybe the remake developers will be able to get some ideas from this video. I had them in mind too, making the changes that I did. I don't think it would take more than an hour for any remake version, so within an hour of working on it from start to finish, I would be able to make this Town Hall Siege Units mod with no problems. And I actually just tested it. I did a speed run for modding the game from scratch. I have a folder here for developers. Go to the source code. Even with all of these lines of code where I have before and after code that I edited, I actually just went through this and it took me 27 minutes just to replace this with this by copying this and pasting it over this for all of the new code and old code in here. So that's why I know it's roughly 30 minutes of work, and there's really no room for mistake when you do it like that. Just to comment on why I don't have the default catapult throwing sound. and in its place instead have the carpenter hammer sound, combined with the coal miner reaching underground sound. When that sound effect is played through the remake, it messes it up, and it's just like how you heard in King Dairon's video. The reloading sound effects from the Ballista and the Catapult were also messed up, but not as bad. Their pitch was just too high. This is how the Ballista reloading sound was before I fixed it. But now you'll hear the actual sound in the original game versus the modified sound that I have in the remake. And for the Catapult, it would be like this. But in the original game, for the Catapult to reload, the pitch is lower. Right? So I corrected the sounds.dat file for at least those two, but I wasn't able to fix that sound for the Catapult throwing, at least not yet. I only modified these two sounds for siege weapons that are not used in the game normally anyway, but all other sounds are kept the same, they're not affected. And if someone else in the future makes a siege weapon mod of their own, there's no reason why they shouldn't use the sounds.dat file that I'm going to provide to you, because the siege weapons, if they're going to be using the original game sounds anyway, and want it to sound like the original game, then this should be the new sounds.dat file for everyone to use from this point on. One thing I mentioned earlier, but it was in a subtle subtitle that maybe you didn't see it, but the projectiles they throw does not hurt you. If you have the siege unit and they fire, it's not going to hurt your units or your buildings like it did in the original game. I did that because it's just no fun if they kill your units and their units at the same time. I know it's like that in like Age of Empires. I could fix that later. For their power rates, I gave them a power rate of 18. The Barbarian, for example, is 5.3. So just keep that in mind. Maybe I can lower it if it's too high, but I'm just thinking that's where it should be. I believe based on how I structured this video and explained everything I did in the code, it should be fairly obvious how to balance the siege units into the game should the settings I have make them too strong. But if they want to make it weaker and not like the original game, which the remake was supposed to be about all the way, then if they can add it in, then all the power to them. But for someone who wants them to be the same strength as they were in the original game, then if the remake developers will put them in but be weaker, then people like us are still going to have to add them in. Someone who wants the siege weapons to be stronger than what I have said, that's easy to change. Make them as strong as you want. Make the catapults throw 10 rocks instead of 3. That's not an issue. But I think going that way is not a good idea either. We should just try to stick to replicating the original game. That's what this is all about. But everything else, the armor, the attack, their firing speed and delay, you name it, this video is going to show how to affect any one of those and many other things. Everything that's involved. I'm not going to hide anything. I'm not going to rush through anything. I'm not going to miss any detail. To the best of my ability, etc. Well, that's it then. I hope you enjoy the mod and let me know what you think in the comments below. Alright, so for those who just want to play with the mod, just have fun with it, and I can just say thank you for watching and have a nice day. But for those who want to continue, let's get started. In this video, I'm going to be showing whoever wants to watch it, that is, how I actually did this from start to finish. I modify every bit of the code that's there, explain everything I do and why I did it and how I found it out and all that stuff so you can learn. It's going to be basically a part 2 to this video here, where it's going to be a more extreme example of modding the game. And I'm not going to lie, I'm going to say a disclaimer now that not everything I'm going to tell you may be exactly 100% correct, but it's correct enough that it makes the game work and work as intended. No change that I'm going to show you is something that I don't know what it does or what it implies, or what I imply it does or should do. In addition, I did not change any of the behavior of any other unit in the game or building or whatever. If you have not seen this video of mine yet, then if you click on more and you go down, you see the chapters. You're going to have to watch the first 12 minutes to get up to speed if you are interested in learning about the code and compiling KaM Remake, which is going to be required if you're going to be following all my steps. The source code may have changed by now, even though it hasn't been that long since the latest version has been released as of this video, and I should say as of that video. But anyway, let's get started. Okay, I'm going to start out with a fresh copy. I've already done the things to initialize it so that it can compile which I showed in this video, within the first 12 minutes of it. So now we're all set to start. We'll start Delphi 12. One thing I said in that video last time was that you don't have to save it when you compile. It's going to save it. It actually is going to make a temporary folder. It's kind of like a hidden folder that it's going to save it, but it's not actually going to save a copy for you. You will have to save it yourself, and an easy way to do that is once you X out of the whole project, just say yes when it says do you want to save. And another thing I didn't mention, that for me 64-bit wouldn't compile. Maybe now it would, but I don't want to mess with it. But 32-bit is what I've been using, if you didn't notice that, but just know that now. And I'm going to tell you a huge tip sooner than later about when all of a sudden it doesn't compile for no reason. What you do, it's fairly simple, but it's unobvious, or at least it was to me. Alright, so without further ado, let me get started. I squashed it down to 9 different categories of changes that I made for this mod. Some things maybe like projectiles and sound effects and even siege unit specs may all be merged together. You can think of one change to the code that I show you how to make. You might think that it's all 3 or one of the 3 or whatever, and it's not the one that I say it is, but I try my best. So this is kind of an overview of the different things that is involved with this. We have to have some specific steps to convert a warrior into a ranged unit, and then after that eventually make what he fires the ballistic bolt. And we also have to change the icons and the scroll images when you select and all that stuff. Why don't we start with the KaM defaults? So that's going to be, you can just see the path up there. It's source common KaM defaults. Alright, even though it's shown in the last video, make sure that this is false because we don't want to have debug mode. We want to have the game look normal. Next, if we go down to 600 and something, right after unit type, I don't know if you know what types are, what your background is, but these are like words. So UT means unit type, and this is a list of all the units in the game. The scripting language has numbers assigned to each, and so does the source code, of course. But those are numbers. These are, of course, words. And it's interesting that they have the Catapult and the Ballista here. I mean, that's where they have it in the constants. But I actually tried to add a new unit to the game, and I was most successful, even though I wasn't completely successful yet, to add it after the duck, not to add it in between all this, because the way this appears to work is the game is going to read this information of all these units from the unit.dat file, and so their order needs to be retained. Cannot change the order of it. Maybe the code that the remake developers wrote files did not include this in it, that you'd have to go put them in it in order to read from it. But to keep a long story short, my plan was to add them in and then make them have attack and everything myself from the source code, because it's easy to do that. The way things are, you just have to add a little bit here and there, as you will see, based on how I convert the rogue to a catapult or the warrior to the ballista. But the catapult is more extreme because there's 3 rocks to throw instead of just 1. And as of right now, this is going to be the first mod of the remake ever that the catapult throws 3 rocks. But anyway, it's going to be useful to be able to have a category for, like right here we have the sets like units are human, units are warriors, and so forth. Just right underneath that, I'm going to put this, and so that's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to copy and paste code that I have somewhere else here to make things go quickly, but I'm also going to put a comment with my name, C. Mola for Christopher Mola, to describe what kind of change it was amongst these. And I want to do this because it's a set. This represents a set. It's not an array like in the scripting language. This is like a set. I could say like if, not that I want to type this here, don't type it, okay? This is just an example. If a unit type is in, so you just say in and you say siege units, then do something, because that's shorthand for warrior, then do something. So that's a lot more work and it's ugly. The two are equivalent. And so that's why I'm going to add this in here at the beginning, because every single unit module of this project, maybe not the utilities and all the dependencies that they used, not talking about the real backend stuff, it's going to call or use the KaM defaults, of course. And then, as I showed in this video, I'm going to come down here to the very bottom of the same page while I'm here and replace this with this. And then here I'm going to comment this out and put a comment there that this is the same type of thing, game setup. If I were to compile this, and again you have to click OK every time, this happened in a very recent version of Delphi that they started having that warning. 394. Okay, this is exactly what I'm talking about. This is the kind of error, and I already got it. It's crazy, but I got it already. It opens up some module. It's like, what? It opens up some module you're not even working on. It has nothing to do with anything, and there's no logical explanation for this. Well, there is, but maybe I'll explain how I found out how to find a solution later when I get to the projectiles. But I'm going to X out of that module. With your project folder open, these are binary files that this compiler makes. So just delete the entire folder. It's as simple as that. And now when you recompile, it's going to regenerate those files. As you'll see, it just regenerated them, right? It's saying this because I just made this new copy and Windows is blocking something. It's blocking this game from accessing the game settings file, I guess. You just have to do that like normal, do that. And now you have to compile again, and that's it. You only do it one time. I just wanted to show this, that what we changed at the top, it's here, but nothing else has changed. If I go to the test map, the rogue is still the rogue and the warrior is still the warrior. And so I made this test map. You can as well. Put serfs with some food in the storehouse. Put a rogue and a warrior facing north towards an enemy building. Have one enemy unit. And I'm going to write a little script for this too, because we need to see that this works with script code, as well as that the siege units can be trained from the town hall. That's why that is there. And also load the town hall with gold. Make it like a solid 800. If you go to 1K, it's not going to be readable. It's going to say 1K. Instead of 1000. I put 800 in there so we can see how much gold is taken out when we want to consider the price of the units. X out of this, because when we compile again, just as I said in this video here, you have to X out of it every time you want to compile, otherwise it's going to throw an error down here. Speaking of the town hall, why don't we do that first? That's easy and pretty straightforward. There's two different locations we have to make changes to. Go to GUI and then KaM interface game. On line 144, I'm going to change the order of the units. I'm going to move the rogue be second to last. There's my comment, the kind of change. That's all I have to do there. And then I'm going to open up res units. So res units. We're going to be editing this one quite a bit. Go to 190. I'll put my comment and I'm going to move the rogue to be second to last. And then I'm going to make it cost 30 and the warrior costs 30. Or the catapult and the ballista respectively. Let's see that they cost more and that they're reordered in the town hall. Okay, you see that, right? It's gone. There we go. And it doesn't say 30 gold here. It just shows all that. Maybe later we can say times 30. But for right now, I guess that'll have to do. Because I don't want to spend any more time on this right now. And look at this. The storm attack makes their speed 1.5 times what it normally is. How about that? And no, we're not going to change that. I'm just mentioning it. Not going to change that. I like KaM the way it is. I just wanted to add siege units to it because it was part of the original game and the remake was supposed to be a remake of the original game. Now while we're at it, we can do something that's pretty simple. We come down to... It's actually right here, isn't it? Yeah, if we want to change the names of the units. For example, when we select it here and it says rogue, or anytime like we come here and we hover over it says rogue, and we want to change it that it's not just English but every language, right? Every single translation of the game. We want to change these two here to catapult and ballista respectively. If I just select one of these and Control Shift F and I click OK, then it's going to tell me where it is. It's actually in this file here. And I'm just going to take this and drag it to the end. And while I'm at it, I'm going to X out of KaM Remake. It's still going to keep this project open. We don't even make any changes to that file anyway. It doesn't matter. Catapult and Ballista. This is a case of. Everything else is going to be a result of an offset. But we don't have a literal unit type or UT Catapult and UT Ballista for it to work with this. We have to add them in ourselves. And then unit type warrior. Alright, and while we're at it, right above here, just a little bit, there's another case of. This one's easy. I have to compile this to open the game to show you. Well, I mean, I don't have to do it exactly, but why not compile it so that we can see the name of the units has changed to what we want them to be. And they have everywhere. It's a universal change. But what I'm talking about is this, the scroll that you see in the town hall. Or when you select the units, the same exact sprite. Now we're going to take a look at the sprites. Press F11, look at resources and then GUI. Gonna take probably 10 seconds. Or okay, that was fast. You're gonna get an export folder and here you go. You can zoom in to see what things are. You have to read this as 457. You ignore the 4 and the underscore. I remember they were close to 500. 549 for the Catapult and 550 for the Ballista. This is such a big change that I'm just going to comment this out and replace it with this. And I'm going to put a space because that's how they have it in the game. I should have written the town hall like that. So 549, 550, and then I have an else for what was there originally, and you have to check if the unit is valid. Just leave it as is, otherwise the result will be 0. Let's compile this. There you go. Let's go ahead and export the unit animations, all, because we need to get the unused, which is not available from just soldiers or civilians, I don't think. I think we'd have to say all. I could be wrong, I never checked it, but I'm assuming it's that. It's been running for about 30 seconds now or more, but it's getting close. We don't need any of this, we just need unused whenever it comes. It says Ballista instead of Warrior, which is interesting that even the folders now, they change when we change the name. Finally finished. Unused. I cheated ahead of time, but what you can do is scroll down till you see the catapult, which is not that far. We want to have them facing forward because they're all facing forward. We also see it in replays. Click here and total equip, for example. Right? Then maybe other places too, but they're facing forward. But before I mention that, I want to mention something that is in the source code that we're going to see later on when we do the sprites for the siege weapons. I'm going to Control Shift F to bring it up now, but it's unit underscore still underscore frame with an S. It's in res units, this module actually. It's on line 178. So unit still frames is just as they say here. Here is a catapult sheet and a ballista sheet. We have 3 unit actions. That's what the UA stands for. We're going to pay attention to for each of these units. And for walk, for the catapult, for example, the still frame is 3. So it starts out with 0, 1, 2, 3. And I went and carefully looked at the siege units in the original game. And this one right here is just showing the still frames, right? It's not moving. I'm just rotating it. And I have the video zoomed in. I used a video editor to make this clip that it's zoomed in some so you can see the shadows too. It's very important that you can look at these shadows to identify the specific frame that it is. And this is Media Player Classic, by the way, MPC. And I'm mentioning that because this video player turned out to be very useful, because if you pause it and you press Control and then the right arrow key, it's going to go over just one frame. I moved this window over so you can see the time. It may not show like this by default, but as long as you see a change in something, the tree waves or the flag waves or something, you know that a frame or a tick for the original game has happened. Now there you go. I have to hit it a couple times for it to move. But observing this shadow, simultaneously that I was observing this shadow here, I was able to resort these in order because I used a program I wrote in Microsoft Excel to insert images into the cells and then click on a cell and Control X to cut and then paste somewhere else to rearrange them in the order in which they walk, which I observed from these videos that I filmed. Just to be brief, I can open up a new sheet and I have the code in here that I used. I just scroll down here to grid squares. I click that. These are pretty big squares so that the image will be able to fit inside of them. Because when we click on a cell in Excel and we cut it and paste it somewhere else, we want to be able to move the image. The image, if it's not entirely inside of the cell, then that's not going to move the image. You would have to manually drag them. And if we want to keep them all aligned, this code I wrote, which is right here, this subroutine, that's what sub stands for, is going to insert them in. I just demonstrate how this works real quick. I have a folder on my desktop called Ballista Stuff. Oh, well, I do now. And inside of here, it's just the Ballista. It's not its bolts. And I removed the mask files from here. This is all about this. Actually, I'm not going to modify any code in here, but it's directly related to this, what I'm talking about right now. And that's for the icons, but this is all related. And I have to get into this sooner or later anyway, so I'm going to get it started and then come back to these sheets later when we need them. Because I have these numbered a certain way to explain some arrays that I have in there. And I'm going to give this to you in the form of Google Sheets, and maybe this workbook as an attachment in my Google Drive so that you have the code to do what I'm going to show you now. I'll provide a link to it in the video description. You can go look for it right now to follow along if you have Microsoft Excel, and maybe look at my video on farm efficiency or my build ratio tool. I have instructions in there to run VBA code. That's what it's called, the code in here to do this if you've never done it. But you need to have a desktop application of Microsoft Office for this to work, to run the code that I'm going to show you, just like the code I just ran to make these all square. Anyway, you press alternate F11 to open up this window. By default, it's going to look like this. You double click on this. I X out of this because I don't want to see it. You're not going to have a background and text color and stuff like I have it. You have to get a special program that someone wrote in order to change the background and all. But I have the directory of the folder with the Ballista stuff. I had it copied in here ahead of time. Whatever sheet is active, which we want it to be this one, it's going to insert them accordingly, starting from the top left and going down. It's going to insert the main image as well as the mask file. This takes a moment. This is a lot of images. I don't know if you see it, but now you see it. But I don't have any masks in that folder. There is no mask in this folder. I took them out ahead of time because I don't need them. I just kept them like this because I like this. But in this folder that you just export, it also has a .txt file in addition to the mask. The mask is, if you don't know, I didn't know anything about sprites, so I hope I'm not wasting your time. I'm just going to take a few seconds on this. But this is the main image, this is the mask. The white represents the player color. So as the player color is changed by the game's code, the white is going to reflect that change. And we're going to have to pay attention to that when we make the icons, because, for example, we can see from the map editor that when we add a person, look at the color of the units. If we change it, the units colors change too. And we want that to reflect with our icon that we're going to replace these with. And we're actually not going to, as I'll show later, we're not going to do anything with the flags. We're going to reuse the rogue flag for both the Ballista and for the Catapult. But anyway, back to this still frame. We want to go down to when it's facing south. It's still frame number 6. And for the Ballista, we're going to scroll down again and look for its still frame, which is also 6. For facing south, as I mentioned in the source code here in ResUnits, which we'll be editing other things in it soon, this is for the unit direction array, TKM direction. Control Shift F that. It's in Knights and Merchants points. You don't need to open this module, but it's here. It's important to note that the first one is a placeholder for direction, not applicable. Now this is in the code. When you want to like halt a group, they're basically moving nowhere, but they're technically have to move to halt. And when they move to halt, the direction is NA, but then it starts with north and then it goes in a clockwise fashion until it gets to northwest. And that's how I have these. I have it start at north and then it goes in a clockwise direction. The important thing is we go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is 6. 6 is the still frame for facing south. So there you go, I have that 6. They start out with 0. Not this. This doesn't start out with 0, and I'll explain that later. But this and this do. But both of them are 6. We just need to look for this file, therefore, in this folder. So it's quick to just find them facing south. I'm scrolling down a little bit more, and it's right here. So I need to copy this and the mask to the desktop. You should as well, because we're going to crop around them and then shrink it so that it fits in the icon slots in the game, because the game doesn't automatically resize the images at all actually. And we'll do the same for the Ballista. But in addition to that, and I'm going to X out of KM points now, but I come back down here in ResUnits to here, it says 70 for the Barbarian. That would be the GUI RXX. We just scroll down a little bit, we see 70, we see the Barbarian. So that's a confirmation that this is correct. And therefore we're going to be getting the Rogue and Warrior files and put them on the desktop as well and observe their size and resize the Catapult and the Ballista to those respectively. So I'm going to show you how to do that. I recorded this ahead of time, so this is a separate recording, but this is the process that I made the icons from that are in the attachments that I sent you, just to let you know how I did it and some free software you can use to do that. If I copy this into the modding graphics folder and I copy this name and I click on here and Control V, let's see it in the game. So whenever you don't make any changes, you can just use the play button to open the game. That's a shortcut. Now when we come here and we see the people, there it is, but it's really big. It's sticking out. If we change the player color, it stays red. So we need the mask file also, but we need to shrink them and shrink them both. So it's kind of tricky because there's two different files and we have to shrink them both and we have to maintain transparency, so we have to do a specific program. I'm therefore going to grab the mask file and copy that and paste that to the desktop, or I can put in the modding graphics folder, it doesn't matter. And here I can rename it to what it needs to be, so at least we can see from the game that when we change the color of the players now in the map editor, it's going to change with it. Now, there you go. So now I just should shrink them down some, right? Let's use this as a reference. Let me rename this to AAAA or something. Then right click on this and then say dimensions. If this is not in there, you just say more and then scroll down till you find dimensions and then check it and say okay, and then it will show it. We want to make them both this or something close to it. Size them both down. Since the images have transparency, we need to not use Paint, but Paint.net or something like that. I have Paint.net, I'm going to use that. Very popular program to use for something like that. Okay, and I think because this is just black and white, as I mentioned earlier, no other colors, maybe I should edit this, and it has no transparency either. I can open up the mask and Paint and zoom in on it. Whatever I do to this, I have to do to that. And I want to make it, okay, I lined it up, so I wanted to make it those dimensions. Let's say that I would remove the bottom two. In order to do that, press Ctrl-Shift-R to resize the canvas. Decrease the height, and I need to put this there so that it removes it from the bottom. It was already there, you can move it anywhere around. Okay. I removed two from the bottom. I need to do the exact same thing with the mask at the same time. Gotta be very careful. We can see the dimensions there. I just drag this up too, so that is gone. 26 divided by 61. That's the heights divided by each other to get a ratio. Now I multiply that by 53. Then it would be 22.5. So it's almost exact. Let's say I were to add 1 to the width of this. So if I would have multiply that instead by 54, it would be 23 by 26. It would be almost exact. So I'm going to come in here and say Ctrl-Shift-R to resize the canvas and add 1 to the width, but I'm going to click here to add it to the left side. And there you go. But at the same time, maybe I can, now if we want to center this, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and on the left side I have 2. That's a total of 9. The image itself looks like the right margin can be a little bit bigger than the left. So if I have a total of 9, I can put 5 on the left from the right, and then it will be center. Let me first do what I did on the right side. I added 1. I just Control-8 it and then put it there. And you don't have to do it every time, but you can just make it all black, because that's what this is, just white and black. Okay, now I can adjust this, and I'm going to adjust this accordingly. I'm going to be very careful so that the mask is in line with this, always. There's a total of 9 of margins when you combine the left and right, and I can actually make it 10 really if I would consider this extra one here. So really, I could remove 3 from the right, resize canvas, Ctrl-Shift-R, decrease the width by 3, and click this, and remove it from the right. I'll do the same here, and you can see it down there, so I'm going to go to 51. Okay, and now I'm going to add that 3 to the left. I'm going to do it here first. So I'm going back to 54, and I'm just going to Control-A it and drag it, and then there you go. But here I have to do it to this too, so Control-Shift-R, increase it to 54, but this time we're going to add it to the left side. Now the image is correct. I can now click on that in the toolbar, select around here and say delete. Checkerboard pattern means transparent, and what I could do is remove this shadow and zoom in and remove the shadow here. Just all of those black dots, and maybe some in the middle. Control-Z is undo, by the way. I don't know, that might be good enough. That might be part of the image. Probably these two. 54 by 61, 54 by 61. Now when I save this, I'm going to save as the same name as before. Why not? Because that's what we want anyway. But when I save it, you got to be careful to save it as 32-bit. It might be on auto detect or 16-bit or 24-bit or whatever. Make sure it's at 32-bit, otherwise this image is not going to process in the game correctly. So the mask, I'm going to save it, and now both are updated. The game has to be closed. You have to open it up to see changes, but again, that was in the modding graphics folder. Alright, let's see. Oh, I forgot to resize it, but now we can see that the mask at least looks correct. It is a little bit more compact, and we can see that the borders are gone. But let me actually resize it now. Paint.net, open with Control R. Control Shift R is to resize the canvas. Control R is to resize the image. Width is 23 and we get 26 exactly as before. Now I'm going to save it as again and save it as the same thing, and yes, and as 32-bit. Do it from Paint. Control A. Then I resize pixels 26 and then we get 23. Yeah, Paint.net, you lose the mask. The white becomes gray, grays it together, and it kind of messes it up. Alright, now they're all the same size. I don't need this anymore. I'm going to reopen the game and let's see our new image. And let's see that when we change the player colors it changes to, yeah, there you go, you can see the green. It's hard to see, but in our test map, totally equipped, it looks pretty good. And let me go to the Ballista actions. We're going to look at UA walk or unit action walk facing south still frame. It's 8532. I'm going to go to export and then unused. We're going to look for 8532. We have to copy the file and its mask. Open this in, let's say, Paint, like I did last time. Scroll in and put it on the side, and open this with Paint.net. Scroll in. I can cut this and paste it in here so we can see the dimensions that we need. I thought it was 12 at first that we can remove from the right, but let me just show you that maybe it's just 10 and go from there. So let's say the width is 44. We're going to take away 10. And this is our new dimensions. It's not anywhere near the required amount of 26 over 27. That's almost a ratio of 1. If we were to therefore add 6 to the height, it would be really close. The way this is centered, I could take 2 from the bottom. But before I get to that, let me just do this first. What I made a change to. Let me remove it from the mask. 10 from the right. Okay. Now I'm going to remove 2 from the bottom with Control Shift R. So click this, and the height, we're going to decrease it by 2. And I'm going to do that here as well. Alright, now if I were to add, since the height is 1 bigger, if we were to make this height equal to 1 bigger than 44, would that be enough? 44 divided by 26 times 27. That's a quick way to get it, I guess, what we need. So we can't get it exactly, right? It'd either be 45 or 46. It's closer to 46. If I add 5 to the top and bottom, then it would be good. Control Shift R, height, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then Control Shift R, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and click this so it adds it to the top. Click this so that we can select here and press delete to make that transparent, and do the same for the bottom. And for Paint, for the mask, we're going to add 5 to the bottom, Control A it, and bring it down to there. Add 5 more. Just click on this and then that, and then okay. So the mask is done. I'll save it, and maybe I should put it in here. And let me go ahead and resize it too. I forgot. Control A and resize. Pixels 26, and it will be 27, it says. Okay. Alright. So we're completely done with the mask. We just have to rename it now, because it's 85 something. It's going to be a low number, right? It's going to be 81. But this one now, Control R, 26, it's going to want to say 27. Now we say File, Save As, and you can overwrite it. I want to say yes and make sure it's 32-bit. Okay. Now this is the warrior guy. Going to rename this just to, and I copied it just to get the name. That's how I do that. Delete it and rename this. And rename this. And that should do it. Alright, let's view the game. Remember, you have to close it when you make an edit like that to the modding graphics folder. There it is, Ballista. Let's change the player colors. It changes with it. And in player stats, we have total equipped just to see it. Yeah, they look pretty good. Okay, alright, those were kind of repetitive of the rogue to the catapult, but now it's a little bit more sophisticated. For those who may have, if I decided to have bookmarked this so that you basically got the idea of how to do that and you don't want to see that again, you can do that yourself or whatever. Alright, so with the images in the modding graphics folder, we want to put this with the original game all in the same folder. And I should say the original exe, because it's only the exe in these image files that's going to be part of this mod. The rest of it is all the original game's files and folders. We can rename this to something else. How about Siege Unit Icons? But the game is not going to recognize it unless we tell it to look for Siege Unit Icons instead of modding graphics. So let's get to it. It's a very easy step. Just Control-Shift-F and search for modding graphics. There's actually two instances of it that we need to replace. Obviously, right? You can see that. So there you go. And there you go. But with each one, I need to put a comment. There and there. And in res units, I didn't put anything here because I didn't make any changes at all. But I'm going to just put this comment above it. So I let everyone know that I didn't do this directly, and that's the Siege Unit Icons folder. Just to check, if we were to, right now there is no modding graphics folder in here because we renamed it, right? So this will be a good test to see if the game reads the icons like it did when we were just looking at it after we made them. Let's see if they're still there. Yep, they're still there. Change color and everything. Alright, one other change we can make that's pretty easy to do is right here, the power rates for the units. I'm going to put them on these two lines, so therefore I'll put the comments right now. But Metal Barbarian is the warrior. I made it 18. When you have these, it's 18 because they're 30 gold each. It's not directly proportional. As you just saw, the warrior was 5.3. It's a little bit more than triple. We can change it later, but I'm just thinking that this would be a good power ranking for them. And part of the criteria of units is their health condition, how hungry they are. And the siege units are always going to be 100% full. Well, I'm going to get to that in a little bit. I'm going to make it like this video here where I wrote a script to do it, that it converts the hunger bar into a HP or hit point bar. So I'll show how to do that for the code for the siege units only. While we're in here though, we can begin to convert the warrior into the ballista. Go up to 669, I believe. No, it's a little down right here. Basically, we look for the Metal Barbarian, and I'm going to put this comment. There's 4 different group types in the game, and so he's melee, of course, most people know. We just need to change him to gtGroup.OrderFood. If I compile the game, we'll see if there's any change in the behavior of the warrior by making that one change and what it is. He still fights the way he does normally, but now he can no longer storm, and he can link with him. So we changed this group type to ranged, and that was one of the consequences. The flag is still the melee flag, although we're not going to be able to see a visual effect of this. It is part of the core game code. If we go back to res units and come up a little bit till we get to here, this is the type of unit actions. There's different ones. Just like in this video where I showed a diagram to change the building cycle timings about how all the components, and that's not all of them, just some of them, a big chunk of it, but not everything. It was insane how much stuff it was. And this is another one. It's kind of related to the sprites that I'll get into later, but it's not that you really need to know all this, but this is just to have as a reference. But this is what I mentioned in that video actually. 3 because this had to do with the sprites. These are the different ones that we have that they can do, and this is a list of them that we have for each unit. So for none and NA, they can't do anything, so the developers didn't put any type of unit action in there. Then we have some that can do some of everything. The point is, I need to change the warrior, and while I'm at it, I can change the slingshot too, which is the rogue. And we don't allow them to eat. I don't think it really is going to matter that much to take it out, but we certainly don't want to take out the other ones, because spec for the slingshot or the rogue is, well, we can see that ourselves in the export folder. If we go, now he's named the catapult instead of the rogue, and we go to spec and we scroll and zoom in, that's the rocks he throws. So we definitely don't want to mess with that. Now the Ballista or the warrior, he has a spec folder too. It looks like this is when he's storming, when he's doing a storm attack. But still, because the rogue or the slingshot UA spec is projectiles, maybe it's safe just to keep it. It won't hurt anything, but we don't need to have them eat. The next changes that we're going to make to the warrior are going to be visible. That's right here, the fight type. Right now, the Metal Barbarian, we're working to convert him to a Ballista. The fight type is either melee or range for every single unit. Obviously, look at that, right? We're just going to make it fight type range for him. So let's take a look at what that does. He's as helpless as a normal ranged unit. Yeah, and it's giving us an error because we didn't complete it yet. We have no projectile for him to throw. That's why it's saying unknown shooter. I can actually show you in the code where it is. You can search for it yourself. Unknown shooter. It's either here, it's not this one because that's when they attack a house. We are going to edit this one too, but that's not the one that it was because we wanted to attack that militia. It can't be that one. It's going to be one of these, so get firing delay, it could be any one of them. I don't know which one it is, but I X'd out of Unit Warrior. I don't want to get to that right now. And I'm going to X out of this. We don't need that anymore. And I'll say save changes. Yes. And I don't need that one anymore. And I'm not sure if we need that one. But this one I don't think we need anymore. Okay, back to res units. Just a little down and IsMelee. I'm going to put a comment here and for IsRanged as well. So all we're going to do is just take this and cut. And then paste it there because it's no longer recognized as a melee. And how I found these was I just searched for unit type warrior and I with Control-Shift-F and I looked through all of the occurrences of it in the game and I decided which ones were relevant to what we wanted to do to substitute a unit into the warrior. And these were obviously two of the things that need to be done. We don't need to do anything for the rogue because the rogue is already a ranged unit. There's some other small changes we can make to further convert the warrior into a ballista. For that we will have to open up unit warrior. We go up, the first occurrence of it that we have to change is, we will be editing this one too, but for right now, this just for this one category, min fight range. Right now, it's all ranged unit types in here. We need to add the warrior in here too. And as far as I could tell, the close range of the siege units is the same as the close range of the human ranged units in the game. So all I have to do is just include this in the commissaries. Unit type warrior. I'll put a comment there. Now when we make that one change and we go back, even though we did not fix that exception from coming up, it came up automatically even though he didn't come up to him. So it did change in some way, not the way I was expecting, but it did change by doing that. See, if I remove it, yeah, the militia, it makes its way to the warrior first and then it crashes. But when we make this change to affect his minimum fighting range, he's already ready to fire because he's in his range. The minimum fighting range for a warrior by default is 0.5. But here, I guess it's 4. I don't know, it seems to be smaller than that, but whatever. But now we're going to go down to where we affect that minimum range. That's the next step. And we will add him in, unit type warrior. Result equals 4. Because the other ones are 4 above, right? They're here, they're 4. And I'm going to put that same comment that we're furthermore trying to convert the warrior into Ballista. Now this might actually stop that exception from coming because there it is, right? Yeah, as far as the game concerned, it could be a siege ram or something, you know? Unknown shooter. We don't know what min and range means for this unit. Yeah, okay, so that fixes that. So he behaves just like a ranged unit, right? He doesn't attack like one because he doesn't have anything to throw yet. But his fight type has been changed, right? We changed that already. So speaking of something for him to shoot, why don't we get to that next? Okay, if we just scroll down just a little bit, we're going to see PT. And that means projectile type. So if you just Control-Shift-F this, we'll navigate right to it pretty easily. It's the unit module named common game types. There's nothing in it except for the projectiles. Interesting. I'm going to remove this old comment and I'm going to add in both the ballista bolt and the catapult rock right now. Because when you add in one, you're going to have to add in an element into every single set that corresponds with this one. And you'll see what I mean in a second. But as I was mentioning earlier in the video, when I compile this... Whoa! This was what I was talking about earlier. Look, and it opens up some mods that we weren't even working on. This is the kind of error I was telling you about earlier, and I'll go ahead and show you the solution again. All you do is in the project folder, you delete this one. Not docs, no, DCU. DCU. And compile again. When we compile though, we're still going to get errors, but it's going to be realistic errors now, not something that's a total mystery that can stump you for hours and hours and hours. But how I figured this out, which I'll explain now, is I was frustrated. I took these out and I just had these four the way they were, renamed this to that with an X instead of a K, and every single occurrence of this with Control-Shift-F that I found, I renamed them, and then I compiled again. I still got the same exact error. It would open up that same module that wasn't being edited, and I was like, the only thing that makes sense is this projectile type tower rock word has to be in one of the files in this folder somewhere, and it was actually in DCU. These are binary files. Like if you were to open up these in Notepad++, they're gibberish, but it happened that the keyword for that was in here, that I could discover that this was the case, that these files needed to be deleted and that they were redone every time it would compile, or every so often, something like that. And just to have complete control over it, just delete it whenever you get that kind of error, so you get a normal error when you compile now. Alright, so this is the next step. It automatically opened up projectiles for us. That is correct. For those who don't know, projectiles, because we didn't have to search for it, it's going to be in source with right down here without you going to a subfolder. Anyway, I made such a big change to these that I'm going to comment all of this out and just put what I added below. Okay, I have to explain this because these are the sounds, so I'm going to put that as a comment. If we look up any one of these with Control-Shift-F, we'll get res sound is the one, because we're already in projectiles already. We get a list of sounds and we see like index 65, 62. They mark some of them what they are. Here's the ones that are kind of relevant to us. If we listen to the bow shoot and crossbow shoot sounds, the crossbow is 60 and the bow shoot is 62. They marked it themselves. I didn't mark that. Ray actually gave us on KaM Discord a little Python program that extracts these from the sounds.dat file, which is located here in sounds.dat. 62 is the bow shoot. Well, it's actually 61 because the last one here, you see it says 76 and 77, 78. The 0 here means none. It's not an actual sound. The first sound is corn cut, and if I go to the top, is it corn cut? Yeah. So it's offset by 1. But anyway, bow shoot, crossbow shoot is 60, so that would be 59. So we come back here. They have rock throw too for the tower, but we want to have ballista shoot. That one is going to be 76, 75, 74, so it'll be 73. But the catapult shoot sound, it just sounds absolutely horrible. It sounds like static. This right here is a different project I have open. This is the one that's already done that I'm reading off of as a guide to do this presentation for you. If I were to copy catapult shoot in place of this which everyone knows. Yeah, I think that's a much better sound than what this would be if we play it. So I'm going to compile this. Ah, right? Ow. I don't know why the Catapult shoot just does not. I've experienced something like that when the sound file was like not a wave and you wanted to play it with a wave with the scripting action for playing sound in the scripting language. It would do something similar, okay? But the Carpenter sound, it works. But I don't know if you can hear it, but I do have another sound mixed in with it. We're going to add another sound later that mixes with it when it fires. And that's the sound of the mine. And when I say the sound of the mine, I don't mean this one. I mean this one, when the coal miner goes down and he reaches the ground. They're mixed together. So when you play the mod, see if you can hear it. It kind of helps give an echo, but not take away from the main sound of the arm hitting the, I guess it would be like a cushion or something for the catapult. But that was the explanation that I wanted to put in that. There is catapult shoot, but no, we don't want to use that. The default building smash is okay. I used it for both siege weapons because it was in the original game. It was like that. For these down here, for projectile speed, so the way this goes is the second to last one is the Ballista, the last one is the Catapult. And I have them spaced out a little bit more than the rest. I made the speed of both of them equivalent to the bow and the crossbow. We want it to be fast. We don't want it to be slow like the Rogue's Rocks, and we don't want it to be as fast as the Watchtower's Stone. We can always increase it, that's fine. This is just what I had it on. It looked fine to me. The arc has to do with how straight it goes. So the more of an arc, the less straight it goes. For the Ballista, therefore, I made it 0 so that there's no arc, because that Ballista fires its bolt so fast that it really doesn't have time to arc or go into the air. But for the Catapult, I kept it the same as the Rogue. And I guess this is jitter that is for thrown at units, because this one says jitter house. And that's the thing we're going to see soon, is that when it attacks a unit and when it attacks a house, there's two different places we're going to have to do the same thing in two different locations for each. But jitter, I guess, is jitter. So I just set that to those. And then down here, the projectile predict jitter, this is the randomness at which the projectile will be off from the target. The greater it is, the more it will be off. I wanted to make the Ballista a little bit off because I have it kill instantly when it does hit, and in the original game sometimes they missed. I didn't want it to kill them every time to give it ultimate power. It's still powerful enough, as we saw at the beginning of the video. They kicked ass. The Catapult, I have a little bit stronger, but not too strong. Now if we go down a little bit more, we have another set of intuples we have to edit, and this has to do with not the arc, but with how along the projectile's path are they allowed to deviate from when they're released from the ranged unit. They're calling offset y the height. What I'm going to do again is I'm going to comment all this out and put mine in because it's too big of a change. Good thing I'm providing this source code for you in the video description, well, an attachment to my Google Drive. As you can see, for the offset y or the height, I didn't think the heights needed to be changed for the projectiles. Maybe the heights for the Ballista could be lowered some. And again, it says here in the comments, I didn't do this myself. It was there for each direction. It's different. You can change it and experiment one by one to see how it looks in the game. I made them the same as the crossbowman is number 2, the PT bolt. I made them the same as that. So that's done. Let's compile this and see what else we have to do before we can compile it. Is it going to let us do it? And it is. But there's some more things we have to edit down here when we go down right here. But before I get to it, because it is quite sophisticated, it would be more important, or I should say more interesting, if we can see the projectiles that they're thrown before we determine what kind of damage they can do. So we paint them. There's a comma separated list here. Every single type of projectile except for the Tower Rock is all together, and we're just going to group the 2 new ones that we added with it so that they will be painted. They're going to go to the render pool. That's the big one. That has to do with the sprites, and so accordingly I'll have that. And speaking of render pool, let's follow this. So they made it easy. Ray put things into folders. was really nice. I guess he did. It wasn't like this in R6720's source code that I could see. They had some subfolders, but not very many. This one is pretty big. Luckily, we don't have to edit too much. And I'm gonna cut the sling rock and put on the end, because most likely if someone's playing with this mod, they're not going to ever use the sling rock. The sling rock is never going to be a thing. I'm going to add this comment here. I guess I can remove one space. These right here are for, as you can see, I wrote it right here, the catapult rocks. There are 5. If we go to the export folder, unit animations that we got earlier in unused, and we go all the way down, then we're going to eventually see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rocks for the catapult, but the rogue only throws 3 rocks. And I thought it would be okay, it would be easy, and you saw it in the demonstration. I'm sure it looked okay. You could see the rocks still rotate. It could just rotate a little bit more. I think the watchtower has, I think it would be under the recruit for spec. Yeah, it has a total of 5 different rocks, and that's actually what these are. I have them here. I chose, you see, you have to ignore the 3 and the underscore, just like we had to ignore the 4 and the underscore with the warrior and rogue icons that we replaced. It's the same thing. I just looked at these and I chose these 3 as alternatives. But if I go back to the unused, we can see that it's 92, 67, 92. I guess you can see where these numbers came from now. And these right here, that is, which is now called the catapult, but it was the rogue. His spec was these numbers here, the 68, it's not 36, it's 6,864. He only has 3 rocks. There they are. So I just put a 1-to-1 correspondence with some extra comments here. If we want to have it throw tower rocks instead, these are my suggested ones. Alright, this is an edit. As I was editing this part of the video, and I thought it was done, I was thinking, all we would maybe have to do, and I didn't do this before, so hopefully this works, but maybe we could have all 5 rock animations. So just for those who may have not understood earlier, because I didn't specify this, but each of these is for one part of the rock animation. So it's going to go through a cycle, and a flight is going to, and not a direction, because just like with the ballista bolts, which I'm going to get to next, I'll say it again therefore when I get to it after this interjection, but the ballista only has 1 sprite for each direction. It's not like the bowman, in which the part of the flight that they go in a specific direction is going to change the length and look. It's not like that for the ballista and the catapult. So in other words, the 3 here that you see for the rogue, all of this is just for 1 rock at a time when we are thinking about the catapult. It's just going to be for 1 rock at a time. We didn't even make 3 rocks to throw yet, but when we get to it, this entire procedure is just going to add the visual of the projectile so that we can see it. The projectile itself that's invisible is created somewhere else. But okay, I didn't mean to say all that, but what I'm trying to say is, if we were to say unit type instead of rogue, because the rocks for the watchtower are from the recruit, just say that instead. So it's going to search his spec folder based on the flight. It's going to calculate when there should be a rotation. And then I go get all the spec numbers for the watchtower rocks. And then I'm going to delete the 3 with the underscore in front of each. And then I'll do the same to get all of the rock numbers for the catapult. And therefore, I can remove these. And these. And these. Make 2 more copies, and then move this here and this here, and do that for the rest of them. And this version I'm editing is the completed version of this code that I'm showing the video to make, if that makes sense. I had a second project that it was already completed, and I started fresh with a new project to put in the code. Everything I'm showing you in this video is the one I'm actually going to give, and is the game that I'm going to release. And this is an edit. I was done the entire thing that already went through the end of the video, and therefore we can see the change now. I've already added the rocks in, I've added the catapults and everything. So I'm going to compile this, and it works. I slowed down the game to 0.1. The rock isn't created yet, but we're going to see if it has 5 different rocks as it's being thrown. And as soon as we see the first 5, I'll stop. Does this look like 9266? It does, right? See that? As soon as it changes, we'll compare it again. That looks like the same one. Same one. Okay, this one looks different. 9267? Yeah, it does. Those frames, it stayed the same. Okay, it changed again. 9268? Yep. Looks like it changed again. Yeah, that's 9269, which you could see up there in the image if you didn't notice. There's a file path in this image viewer I have. It's a really good one. The rocks are out of focus now, but what does the last one look like? Because that would be the last one we just want to see when it changes at the last minute, if it's going to. We have 4 out of the 5 now. We only had 3 with the rogue, so it must. Yeah, I guess that was it. The difference between 69 and 70 is that. Let me zoom in on it. It's still that one here. Man, it's so hard to tell. But yeah, look at this. This angle here, I think it's still 69 at this point, and it disappears. So maybe it's going to use all 5. Maybe if the direction is northeast, southeast, northwest, southwest, that there's a little bit more to travel and he's at maximum distance, then the flight, in other words, is going to be longer. That the percentage that's calculated is going to be rounded so that that last sprite is going to show. But okay, this works. I'm going to remove this from now on. But it's still, because this is an interjection, it's not going to show when I talk about the Ballista bolt. But this will be in the source code that I give you. And if you wanted to have the watchtower rocks, alright, I just added this in. Because we're accessing the recruit anyway, we don't need to get the IDs. It's going to automatically get them from the spec folder. And we wanted to change these to the watchtower rocks. It's very easy. You just remove that case up entirely and uncomment this line so that it kind of looks just like the rest of them do that they don't have a case of. It looks just like this one, right? The recruit. And therefore you could just say comma PT tower rock and it would be the same thing, but just as a test. We can see it now. Yeah, there you go. So it's only 3 rocks that are thrown, but they will be rotated 5 times along the path. That's what the 5 is. But I really doubt that people are going to want that, but they might. But it doesn't match the original game, and that's what this is all about. Therefore, with this interjection, I corrected something that was one hindrance from being like the original game, regarding this at least. Can't think of anything else, at least that was in my power to control, because I don't have the original game source code, but this was definitely one thing that obviously could have been changed, and I didn't think about it initially. And again, I'll provide this version in the source code to you, which you see after this when I talk about the Ballista bolt. The only other thing is this correct, that the order in which the IDs are listed is the order in which is in the cycle that was in the original game for the rock rotations along the projectile path, along the flight. Probably so. The remake developers seem to, for the most part, number things in order for which they're thrown, but I didn't check. But okay, again, this is the end of this interjection. And for the Ballista bolt IDs, this is something that I have to mention. This is a big chunk of code that I'm going to add in here later, but for right now, I'm going to, I guess I could just add in that and add in the rest of the code later to not spoil it, because it's really cool. But it's way up here. It's the constructor. The constructor is something that is only run when a new instance of the class is made, and in this case, the constructor is only run once. This is an interjection. I just wanted to prove it by logging to a file. In this case, I'm going to have a file that is empty on my desktop called notes.txt. I'll probably say this again later, but this is a little procedure that I have just to write to a file. So anyway, ignore these lines of code, or just know that they're for other sprites for right now. This is all you're going to see that's kind of spoiling some stuff. But if I open up from the KaM scripting error handler on about line 180, this is a.log in the scripting language, and most of it is just to check if maximum number of lines has been exceeded, and of course it's going to add the date and time column and stuff like that, which anyone who scripts in this language knows. I stripped it down to this when you get right to it. It uses system utils, but if it doesn't and you have to use it, basically I'm going to copy this and paste it just somewhere above. Doesn't matter as long as it's below the use statement. Yeah, I believe sysutils is used at the top here, right there. And by the constructor, it also uses game params, so that's a plus for us if we were going to view a map in the map editor, because if you want to view a map in the map editor and you're logging, especially for something like sprites, sprites are refreshed all the time, even in the map editor. This would be a good condition to have so that it doesn't log when nothing is really happening as far as we're concerned normally. So I'll have that on, even though I'm only going to use this to test if the constructor is run just once when we start the game or when we open up a map, play a map or something like that. To call it, all you have to do is just put the string, comma, and the file path. That's how I have it set up. It's just a basic define a file variable, check if the file path that you want to write to exist, and if not, create it. Say what you want to do with the file, what kind of action, and this is actually doing the action, and then we close the file. And just a very important note for searching for this, if you put several of these procedures in different files, maybe I should have named it something better, because if I Control-Shift-F and I type in a log without being case sensitive search, then there's a whole bunch of things named that. And so when you want to search for all the logs that you've maybe added in over time, you have to search for a log with A and L capitalized and then OG and say case sensitive. Then here it's going to catch one or two or whatever, however many you have. In this case we only had one, that we can delete it. But it'll be difficult to find it. In other words, it'll be difficult to find it if you have any, if you don't type it exactly the way I do with A and L capitalized and OG, so it might be best to rename it something else. Now, I don't know if write to file is in here, like that with underscores. No, so maybe that would be better to use. Just something that you can Control-Shift-F it and it's not going to be in here. So I apologize for that. But I'm just going to be using that myself because it reminds me of a.log. Just an FYI. But okay, I can just put this anywhere in the constructor. Put it there. Okay. Oh, and I had KaM Remake open already. I have to close that. Yeah, KaM Remake open, but nothing happens, so it doesn't get activated when the game itself is on game start, probably it's called, but when you start a map, like let's say Farmer's Wish or something. Go back to the file, there you go. Yeah, moving units and fast forwarding, it doesn't really matter, it's staying there. So yeah, on mission start, that's when this is going to run, on mission start. So this interjection is just to prove that this only gets activated once, and I guess what I could do is I could comment this out, that if it's in the map editor, and we can see if it's going to print to the log file. Right now I only have one dotted line like that. I'm going to compile this again because we made that change. Go to the map editor, check right now, there's only one dotted line. I load the map, there's a second dotted line. So it's on any type of game type start. This is considered a game type. Alright, so that's the end of this interjection. I'm going to have a whole bunch of arrays in here that are initialized, but it doesn't matter because it's only going to be run once. So I'm going to put it at the end of the constructor. So this is an array with the 8 directions. So this one right here is direction NA, as I mentioned earlier, and then we have north, northeast, east, south, southeast, southwest, west, northwest. But above the constructor, outside of the constructor, importantly, I'm pretty sure it would probably work the same way as procedures and functions do in the scripting language. And I always capitalize my V's if they're outside to signify that it's a global variable, because it's going to be used 800 lines down. The price of efficiency. For code itself, we have to put things everywhere. Maybe that's why they did that. But I'm also going to put this constant here to convert the directions into numbers so that they're like indexes of the array that we initialized down here. And that's how I did it. CMOLA sprites. Now the bolt is set up too. These are, go back to the unused to see the Ballista bolts. It starts here, there's only 8 of them. It's not like the bow that, and we go to his spec, there's several arrows and they get smaller and smaller the closer it gets to the target, right? So there's several, this one's almost like a dot, it's so small. But for the Ballista's bolts, they are pretty much just one size and only one each for each direction. 9226. That's this one here. It happened to be this way that the northwest was the smallest number. I didn't do this on purpose. This is exactly how it was ordered. But that's how it's ordered in the packed files, right? So I had to honor however it was. And I had to put just like a dummy number here, like -1, because direction NA is a thing. So we have to have a placeholder for it. If I come back down here to where it was around 1,000, wasn't it? I have that constant function with the direction, but I have a +1 so that we don't ever encounter that -1 in here for an index of an array. It's going to start with 0. But the direction of NA, if it happens to be in here, it would be -1, which is never going to happen. But I just added -1 to keep it aligned because I wanted to use the same format for some arrays that are going to follow, where it's going to matter. That's why I have this -1 here. Okay, so that's the first step. This will create the sprites for the projectiles. Let me compile this right now, and let's see if we get a warning. Yeah, we do. We get it here too. I thought it may not happen in a new project. Of course it's going to happen. Right, of course. And it's just saying that ID may not be initialized in this procedure that we're working in. And so at the beginning, before this case of switch statement, I'm going to initialize ID to 0. 0 is going to be invisible. Nothing's going to show. That's why I'm choosing 0, and I experimented with that with different sprites, and it works. So if I just compile it again, the warning will be gone. Right, it compiled, no warning. Yeah, but just a little bit further down, we have another comma series of every projectile except for the tower rocks. I'm going to put the new projectiles that we added and include them in that list. But now, if we Control-Shift-F and we search for PT arrow to see what other occurrences we have of the projectile types, 2 of them are in render pool, which we have. And we were already in projectiles, and common file types is where we can change that list of projectile names to begin with. All that's left is Unit Warrior. One occurrence here, I need to add in the rogue. But I need to add in both actually, because I have a new projectile type for the rogue to throw, and I'm going to comment this out. And I'm going to say that this is converting the rogue to a catapult as the reason why I removed that. And that will do it. So that's why I know that's all of them, because I searched for PT bolt or PT arrow. The bowman and crossbowman will be everywhere for sure. The rogue is not going to be. That one, it's actually in its own special places, especially like to attack a building and all, and we're going to get to that soon, where I'm going to remove a sound and do stuff with sounds too. But for right now, let's compile this and let's see them actually throw stuff now. It's going to look funny because the warrior is still a warrior, but he throws a bolt. See, there's the rocks. It's only 1 rock though. I'm going to add in 2 more rocks. That's what I should do next. It's only 1 rock. Will he die before he can throw a dart? Oh, and he doesn't throw the dart at all. What am I missing? Well, he has no range yet. We didn't set that. Besides hit points and attack and all these, you can also set range and so forth. So we'll adjust that later. But right now, what I want to do is tidy up with the catapult, at least to get it to throw 3 rocks instead of 1. And we can also add in the coal mine sound effect to make an echo. We can do that all in 1 step, but we have to do it in 2 different places. One for when they're attacking the units and one when they're attacking buildings. We have to go find Unit Action Fight. Okay, I was already in there. I need to go to the actions folder and then Unit Action Fight. Okay, I think it's line 230. Yeah, it's here. This is where it begins. I put it right here, this code block. This is the rock that's thrown by the rogue, for example, or the arrow that's fired by the crossbow and so forth. I copied this line twice more down. That's all you have to do, even though it wasn't obvious, and I had this twice. Let me delete that, but I guess I could put that there so my code is separate from the rest. But I have sound effects, the coal mine thud, 22, 23, 24. It's going to be 23 from this folder. This one sounds like the catapult in a way, like if it's really hitting something. It says unit type rogue, so this is for the catapult. But if it's the warrior, that's for the ballista, then I'm going to have the carpenter hammer, which we heard earlier, to reinforce that ballista shoot sound. So next time you play with the mod, pay attention to that and see if you can hear it. And I could have put these sounds here or another place, I forgot where, but here worked out much better. It sounded much better here, more natural than in another other procedure because some things are based on a time delay and you have to play with it some, but this is where the final result was. So all I did was I just copied this line down twice. So if we wanted to have 10, it would be fine, right? This is for unit action fight. Let's see if he's going to throw, or I should say it is going to, well, it's still a he. He's going to throw 3 rocks instead of 1. And it has to be at a unit, so I have to back him up, because that's the only one we edited right now. When he throws at houses and when he throws at units, it's different. There it is. But I just restarted just to prove it to you that if I have him fire at the building, it's only going to be 1 because we didn't change that yet, but we're going to change that next because it's the exact same code basically. It's a little different. This is an interjection. This was a good place to put the sound because this procedure right here is like a monitor. It monitors the ranged units every single step. From my current understanding, the step gets incremented every single tick if the cycle has not ended for some reason or was terminated for whatever reason. So in a way, you could think of the step in here as game time, even though steps, if I recall correctly, will not be able to be more than 255 because it's a byte. Oh yeah, it says it right there. But in short, you can think of the step as game time to understand this easier, but they're not the same. But the step does get incremented with each tick based on my understanding. So again, this procedure is going to monitor the shoot times for the ranged units. And in here, this if statement, when the fire delay is reached, because the step will start from 0, and then once it gets to the firing delay, then it's going to be reset to 0. This function, not procedure, I said earlier, sorry, is going to monitor a ranged unit's shooting cycle. So that means you could put in filters here to detect when it last shot or when it's supposed to shoot or some time in between. But this filter right here is for when it's time for it to shoot again, when it's allowed to shoot again. I can say it that way because later on we're going to see in other procedures or functions that they may be delayed because we don't want to exploit firing more often than what they should based on if a unit dies or if you halt them and whatever. So when he's actually allowed to shoot, that's what this really means. Then we do this stuff here. And I added this later. This is for when this is not the case, when it's not time for him to shoot. When it's not time for him to shoot, then for the catapult and ballista, at this specific step, based on the sprite cycle, which I have not said yet, it's basically a sequence of sprites that's going to be displayed at any given step. That's what I mean by that. It's an array in render pool by ballista bolts that I just said a little earlier, but I'm going to add an array for the action, for walking, and for dying for the catapult and the ballista, and that's going to indirectly affect and define this when we're going to play a sound. So it kind of reminds me of what I mentioned here in this video about how the building timings are set. They're kind of dependent on the number of sprites. It seems like this is how this works too. So I just play along with the game of this programming design. I mean, it becomes natural once you get used to it, but it's not obvious, and it wasn't intuitive for me. This type of design where it depends on the number of sprites you have to do anything major, like an action or shooting. Yeah. But anyway, I didn't mean to digress, but basically what I'm saying here is I didn't show this here, but I'm going to present this when I attach the source code. And that's what this means. Right now we can't really see this, but you'll see at the specific step, the catapult, its arm is going to start to go down. Based on the number of frames that we have for unit action fight, it's going to match the original game's time when that sound for reloading is started. What I'll do, this is a fully completed version that I finished by the end of this video that I'm going to be submitting as the source code. I'm going to temporarily comment this out and compile the game just for attacking a unit. We're going to observe that. I'm going to have the ballista facing northeast so we can see its bow, and you'll notice that there is no reloading sound right now.
Yes, move. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Forward.
But now I'm going to add it in, and it'll be this, of course, because this is the ballista.
Move. Move.
And it's just like the original game when he reloads, like I showed at the beginning of the video, where it ends as soon as the bow is fully ready to fire again. The point of this is therefore, what if I would have got this wrong? What if I would have put 5 like the catapult and saying maybe it's 5? See, it's off. So honestly with this, I did a little bit of trial and error, but I also looked to arrays that I have for the sprites and compared them with the images. Well, in this case it's the ballista, so I compared it with this to kind of get the ballpark of which frame it is. It's not exactly 0 through 19. I'll explain later, but I allotted 30 frames or steps for one attack cycle for the Ballista and the Catapult. I had to repeat some of these sprites more than once. But don't worry about it, I'll show it later, but all I'm saying is that based off of that, I looked at that array, not this exactly. I looked at that array, which has these numbers in it, but some are duplicated. When he's at rest, that's duplicated, and one of the other ones, I said it there, I kind of forgot right now. I filmed that a few days ago. I changed that back to 20. And I'll just say it right now, where we will add in the reloading sounds. And as I said at the very beginning of the video, it is the Ballista reloading sound. It's just so high pitched that you can't tell. It sounds nothing like the original game, but I had to modify the sounds.dat file. And I didn't really say how I did it, so I'm going to talk about that right now just briefly. Okay, I'm going to open up a sounds.dat file with a hex editor, one from 2001, and I'm going to open up res sound so that we can see where they're enumerated. But Catapult shoot is a lost cause for right now. I'm going to try to fix it later. But this is the Ballista reload and this is the Catapult reload as it's named. This is going to be the second and third to last sounds. I'll take a look at the Catapult reload first because I'm going to search starting from the end of the file and going upwards. Control N to get to the end of the file. Search. I'm searching for data because every single sound file in here, I knew it ahead of time, has data in it. I clicked here to make sure this side is selected because if you click here, it's going to search for the hex instead of the ASCII. That's the last one, Siege Building Smash. Got to go up another one. So the way it works is simple. You just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 characters before the D in data. That and this one, and maybe more along the lines if it's a really big sound file. This is the number of characters that the sound file has. And then right before that is the keyword called data. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. This value right here, if we would just lower this to 1F, this is a hex table. We're starting at 2B, that's 43. If we lower it to 1F, then that will match the pitch when played through KaM Remake that you hear in the original game for this sound effect, to keep a long story short. So you only have to change one character in here, 1F, and then it'll work. So I'm going to search for data again. Okay, I'm still here. I'm going to search one more time, and it's the same exact thing for the Ballista reload sound. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. This one. It's a completely different number than the other one, but it turns out, as you saw in the very beginning of the video, and for which you can get a hex editor and verify yourself that these are the only values I changed, you can just make these changes yourself, see that your results will match mine. Just change that to 1F, and then you save the file, and that's it. Alright, so we're going to basically write the same lines of code. These lines. These will be in unit action stay, as I'll talk about soon, but for right now, I'm going to show you where to put these in unit attack house for when the unit attacks the house, because this is just for when unit attacks unit, as I said already. Or maybe it's tasks, not actions, attack house. It was here because it's actually just a little bit down where we have to add this in. There's other changes here we have to make. But this is that same line of code, right? It's the same exact line, or pretty much. I'll put it right after. And I have sound effects chop tree, which would be the 5th sound, I believe. Because it sounds pretty good. I tried that one with the Catapult, which is what I'm talking about right now, and it sounded pretty good, but the Carpenter's Hammer was better, so I still left it for the Ballista because I think it might be a good alternative should we not want to use the Carpenter Hammer, but I thought the Carpenter Hammer was still really good. Alright, let's see if he throws 3 rocks now at the building. Let's see if we hear anything. You heard that, right? The hammer's there, but the noise of the rogue, let me turn it up some. The slingshot noise is still there. If I were to edit this map and have them fire at this guy, this poor soul, it fires at him too, so we have to remove it in 2 different places actually. And also you can hear it, the noise when it hits him, that shouldn't be there. We have to remove that too. So there's several things we have to do, not to mention remove the voices from him as well. And when he dies, it's a silent death, or I should say it's a siege weapon death sound that I mentioned earlier. I'll come back to attack house in a moment, but I do actually have to edit one thing in res sounds. So again, to quickly get there, I can just select the Control Shift F. and he'll find it down here. Res sound, it's down here now. It took me, wow, to find this, to trace it down to this. It took me at least 30 minutes when I was looking for it. This is where the voices are when it takes commands. So here we're seeing for the first time, but this is what we used at the very beginning to say if the unit type, which is TKMUnitType, so this is correct, if it's in the set of siege units, and if it is, then we just can simply not execute this at all, just exit. I will consider this a sound effect change. That's the only one in there, but let's see now if when we select them and order them around, if they're going to make any more noise. I select him, no noise, no voices I should say, that's gone. I can't storm him. Any command, halt, wheel right, anything, chow time, but just from them, not from the serfs, or if I have another unit here. They're all okay. It didn't hurt them because they're not in siege units. I can close res sound now for good, and I'll save it, yes. And I can resume back in here if I go just a little bit up. Since the rogue doesn't have a drawing sound like these two do, we should also include the warrior in here. That won't have any visual effect, or I should say hearing effect on the game at all from what it is right now, but it's just technically a thing to do. I said it a little earlier when we were doing the drawing sounds for attacking the units, that we're going to go to unit action stay for the buildings. In this procedure, make sound, we come down here, we're going to basically copy the same lines as part of this case of. It's just villagers, otherwise, instead of saying step, we say funit.anyStep, just like they did here. Some of these have step equals, and then some are step mod cycle equals. But just like it was over there, we just have equals, and that's all there is to it. We have the catapult reload sound effect, which we fixed, and the ballista reloading sound, which we fixed. But if we go down a little bit, let me just go ahead and compile this and play it. Let's listen to the noise. The swinging noise. That. When it's firing at the building. If they fire at the unit, we still hear that. But let's take care of that noise when he's firing at the building. And all you have to do is right here, slinger shoot. We can comment it out. And I'll put a little comment there. These numbers here in this case of statement is for phases of when something is being fired at, its progress for different sounds at different times for the building. This is all about the building, this part here. He's still firing at the unit, so we heard it, but if we fired the building, no more there. It's gone. Just the impact. To stop that noise when they're firing at units now, we go back to unit action fight. Just go up a little bit right here. I'm going to comment this out. That's that same noise, slinger shoot. And I'm going to, you have to include it. You have to include them and say do nothing. Just as it was in that other switch statement or case of statement we saw for unit task attack house. But I'm going to include the warrior as well. And I'm going to say this. That's what we already took care of. We took care of that down here. This is what below means. So let's test it. Can't really test the ballista because he doesn't have a projectile, but I'm going to get to that soon enough. I just want to kind of get rid of all these sound effects for the most part. There you go, right? We don't hear that slingshot anymore. We just hear the sounds we added in the carpenter hammer. I should most certainly put something in there, I guess, to signify that this was originally there and I commented it out. Right above this, though, is battle cry. So fire at will by the rogue is no longer going to be there. And you can see by this, the 20 here means that 5% of the time, because you have to divide 100 by this, so 5% of the time a battle cry is going to be made with every frame. So it's quite often, but it's still 5% of the time increased. It would be annoying. Replace this with this, and I have a comment to signify the change I made, but again, not in siege units. No more fire at will. There it is, right? Completely silent. Now I want to observe what it sounds like when they die. We removed it earlier with all the commands. When they follow a command, it's completely silent right now. Alright, in task unit die, this is the old code. I'm going to comment this out. And I'm going to replace it with this. So we're seeing this again. We defined this set to be the rogue and the warrior. So if it is the siege unit, then we're going to play the sound for destroying a house. And we're going to do it. Oh, and I should have this, because this is a TKM point. And then I have an extra argument here that these don't have down here. And then I have to pass true or false. It doesn't really matter. That's for if we search in media and sound. If we search for .play, this is the one that we're looking at right here, because I want to access the volume. I don't think the sound for siege units dying, especially that we're going to be borrowing the sound when a house gets destroyed, for it to be as loud as when the house is destroyed. It's just a little weapon that rolls. But attenuated, that's what I was looking for, attenuated. I don't notice any difference between if you'd set to true or false. So it really doesn't matter which you choose as far as these sounds are concerned. But the volume we want to set it to, this is 100%. So I think 25% volume is pretty good. As what y'all heard at the beginning, demonstrations, it's not that loud, obnoxious, especially when a lot get killed one after the other. But if it's not a siege unit, then just do the original line of code. When it is a TKM unit warrior. If it's a villager, then you just play the sound. So it's the same code, but I just nested this in there. And that's it. And they're still going to make a noise right now for hitting a unit. We're going to remove that noise. But we have to do that with the code that's in projectiles down here for the update. Is right here, projectiles update, but that's quite a bit of explanation. I'm going to come back to this, but I want to first give the Ballista something to fire before we change the effectiveness of what he wants to fire. And so therefore I have to wait on muting that sound when they hit units and just leave it for when they hit buildings instead. But alright. We're going to go back to res units and we're going to take a look at the unit dat file and get some stuff from there. Change their hit points and things like that. It's right here. This is the constructor just like before, but the other constructor, they will only be run once. As I showed already, we can verify that. Just put the A log in here and put this inside of the constructor just as before. Same type of thing. Oh, this right here, I didn't include this. I don't care about that. I'm going to be just testing the map, so I'm going to comment it out. And apparently, this module uses system utils from somebody. Okay, the game opened. I'm coming here. Oh, okay. No, it did. When the game opens, I'm sorry. Yeah, sometimes it's one thing or another. Let me start a map and see if it prints that line again. No, it didn't. So it's just when the game starts. So that proves what I was actually gonna say, and that the I can remove this A log now, so I don't forget about it, and remove this too. That this constructor runs at the beginning of the game when it starts to get the units.dat, so the defines unit.dat information, which includes all of this information here plus more, which we're going to modify. But we only have to do it for the rogue and the warrior, i.e. the siege units. This is quite a bit of code. I'm going to put it between these two. And I actually have a dividing line to make it even clearer which is what, that it's mine. But the comments just say this. So this is a speed test. Let me talk about that right now. I did this in the original game. This is the Shadow Kingdom Mission 20, of course. And I timed it from when he starts moving, or so I'd say when I clicked, until when he gets to the tile that's marked. And then I waited for him to get there before I made him go. As soon as he got there, I did, though. Doesn't really matter if you time it correctly, but in short, it takes him almost twice as long, but not quite. He moves 52% as fast as the rogue, or I should say it moves about 52% the speed of the rogue, or in this case it could be any foot soldier, so the bowman or whatever. From context clues, I figured out that F items and then the unit type in there is going to give you the unit object. And from there it has properties. And you can just dot it. And then there's a drop down. You can do unit type. I'm doing FUnitDat right now. But then there's spec info. There's Sprite. Sprite 2 is just, I don't know what it's for exactly. But it's supposed to be for sounds. If you look it up, Sprite 2. But I only dealt with sprites down here for the warrior. I'll come back to this later. But I wanted to put all the code here right now anyway. But there's a loop variable that I added in. This is an example of where I search for this non-case sensitive throughout the entire thing, and it only occurred here where I added it in this loop, but I have to add this variable here. It's a local variable to this constructor. A lot of jargon with programming. But these are the unit stats that I mentioned that I assigned for the siege units. towards the beginning of the video. But as you can see, I'm repeating myself in a way, even about the speed, because I mentioned that at the beginning of the video for the general audience that don't want to know how to do all this. But the logic behind this was the rogue was already a rogue. All I did was I increased its sight by 1. For example, I come here with my Ballista. He can shoot at them and they can't shoot him. But if I go 1 more, well, it's not a good demonstration, but they could shoot him. You have to take my word for it. Oh, and that's sight. That's not firing range, right? That's just sight. That's it when you explore the land. That's why I increased the sight to +1 because of the range, which we'll get to soon. We'll get to increasing the range itself with a firing distance soon. I want to first give the warrior some type of range, and for right now I'm going to actually comment these sprite stuff out because the units still look normal, and add them back in when we're ready to add in the sprites, which will be soon, I promise. But then defense, I just have it, as you can see, the defense of the rogue is the same as the defense for the bowman, a leather armored troop, so it made the rogue a little bit more resistant. And then I decreased the hit points to 2, and this was by experimentation. But whatever I assign to the rogue, I'm going to, as far as funit.dat is concerned, this is how you assign it to the warrior. That's just 1 line of code to transfer all of those traits that the rogue has to the warrior. That was the logic behind it. But I guess we want to see the warrior fire something, because as of right now, he's still not firing anything. He's going forward. If we go back to KaMUnitWarrior, we'll get there. It's above GetFightMinRange. The warrior's not in here at all, so the max range is not in here. What I'm gonna do is comment this out because I changed it significantly enough that I think I need to, and put this in instead. The bowman and crossbowmen, they have this, and then I have the range masks for the siege weapons, which I was just mentioning. I just thought I maybe should do it now so we can see the warrior actually fire something. Now he's in here. He was in here before rogue was, but now he is too. That way they're going to fire 1 more range distance than the bowman and the crossbowmen. This is an edit, so you won't see the code like this, but it should be like this. The range max is determined somewhere else, so I shouldn't have put range max +1 for the warrior and the rogue, or in other words the siege units, but it should be range max, because right now if you keep it like how I had it, then they're going to want to fire but they can't fire when they're 1 beyond the range that they're actually given. They're going to struggle and not do anything. I made a mistake when I was initially doing this, but then I caught that, so this is the final code here. This is how it should be. Just look at the source code. That's in here and here. Yeah, just look at the source code, it's all in here. Anything that you're questioning, just check there. But it's one of a few mistakes that I made. But at least before I released this video and the code and the mod, I fixed this. And now the warrior's gonna actually fire something. He couldn't fire anything before. We didn't allow him to. We already gave the sprites for the Ballista bolt a while back. Remember when we were looking at the numbers of these projectiles? That's when we actually made the projectiles visible. We already have seen them for the catapult for a while now. But let's finally see it for him. Or hopefully. Let's see where the error is. It says show raw data. That's where you go. Get range max. Unknown shooter. Oh, I didn't add him here yet either. So that's a good thing. I need to do that too. But that's how you debug from the game itself. You just double click on it. It's going to bring you right to the line. Yeah, because this is get range max. And range max is, if we control F it, just control F so we go to the top of this. Range max is read get range max. We called this, but we didn't put the warrior in, right? It makes perfect sense. We didn't put it in warrior in the function, not get firing delay, but in get range max. Alright, so I'm going to remove this line, and I'm going to comment it in a second, but I'm going to paste this line here with that comment. I could have just made it 11.99, but whatever. And then, okay, let's try this again. Does the ballista or warrior actually fire the ballista bolt now? And we should be able to hear it and everything when he does. Okay, that's firing at a building, but let's see what it says. Call stacks, get aiming delay. Yeah, I don't have him in here either, so this debug thing is really neat. because I do have this in a separate project on the side, but I guess it's a clean way because we want to see him fire. We're desperate to see this guy fire, and we're knocking out one of these at a time in a logical sequence, which they would naturally occur if we were to debug this, which we are. I'm going to come back to this later to complete a thought, but I'm going to just add in the warrior right now, and I'm going to put the rogue with him, and I'm going to assign it to just some. I'm just going to copy this and say is equal to this. Just make this a concrete number, and this as well, so that's roughly the same as it was before, at least for the rogue that was here. Let's see if the warrior will fire now. There's one more up here, get firing delay, so we probably should do that one too. And I actually need to go, this video is getting long, so I'm gonna just do it now. What I want to do for this part, I want to do this, and I'll come back and explain this later what this means. But I mean, I say it right here, out of 30 frames, but starting at index equals 0. So starting at index equals 0, that's this, where the UA work is firing. That's what these are for both of these sheets that I have in here. These start at 0 for a reason I'll explain soon when I actually add in the sprites. But this right here is the focus of the matter. We want to be able to see when the ballista releases that dart and when the catapult throws those rocks. This is going to tell you the specific frame, and it's going to be out of 30 frames that it's going to release it. It goes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then when it gets to 24, the projectile itself is invisible, but then a sprite will make it visible, but they will be in sync that way. This will control both of them. I guess I can justify this with unit specs, even though that these are sprites. We'll see that later. But I just wanted to add the warrior in here because this is probably the last thing. We got the aiming delay and the firing delay. That should be it, so that the warrior can now actually fire his bolt. Yeah, and I mentioned it. I have to go back to that code. It says range check error. The warrior only has in his attack, you have to log it from certain parts of the game. Like right now that he's attacking a building. Let me terminate this. It's right here in unit action stay, the module. If you were to add the log function here and you were to log it, the gparams is supported. No, it's not supported. Okay, it just took a second for it to complain. But I want to log in here, right here, because there's another if statement and all. But this is where he's not staying still, he's moving. And I say it right here, this is a comment, not in the code. This is my project that I already had completed, and I had this comment in here. I should actually go right here because this is the cycle. That cycle, if we go back to res units, this is what I commented out, okay? I increased it to 30, which is a little bit more than what the rogue would throw normally. The rogue would normally throw at 26 frames. I want to explain this right now. I know I'm digressing some, but when I made images for the catapult to substitute for the rogue, by default you can see here on the far left the rogue has 20 minus 2 plus 1 is 19 frames that he throws. But the actual sequence, when you look at frame by frame, it's a total of 26. So it's not quite 30, but it's 26. This 24 and 14 that I added here, this is for when it's all set up that the siege weapons are going to have 30 frames allotted for them starting at index 0. So it's going to be 0 through 29. So for every tick, it's going to be a new frame, basically. I want to log this. Well, not that, this. So the cycle is 30, and we define the cycle where we're going to do it here. This is where we define that for work. UA work, because we're attacking something. In this case, we're going to attack a building, but attacking is attacking. Thankfully, for this part right here. Yeah, so I know it might be hard to follow, but this cycle right here with the get res units thing, that's from what I was mentioning earlier that I was going to show. It's this huge mess here. Get unit animation. But if we just trace this down, just one, we look there, then it goes to the funit sprite. Alright, that's how I figured this out. That's why I have funit sprite here. It took me forever. And this really empowered me to completely ditch all sprites that I made by hand, painfully I should add, for the catapult, and avoid having to do it at all for the ballista. I was wondering, where does the steps come from? You see the step here is a global variable. It comes from somewhere, I don't know where. and where it comes from has to do with where it's initialized to from the unit.dat file. The game will pull it in there, as I showed when I ran the constructor with the other log. It put that dotted line, remember? It ran at the very beginning of the game. It defines these just once, so even though this looks like a taxing thing, this is stored in an array of its own somewhere. And so I will make my own arrays, which I didn't show yet, because I put the Ballista bolt array of 9 integers there, but I didn't add the arrays yet that represent these, but I'm going to soon, when I want to add the actual sprites to make these look like siege weapons, not just behave like them. But let me log this. Let me delete this space, and I mean, it really doesn't matter because I'm going to log the step. So a.log, and for object oriented you could say step dot and say toString. I think that might work instead of just saying int to string. Like for those who know the scripting language, int to string of step. That would work too. Yeah, I don't know why it didn't go away. I just clicked away and then it went away. But I want to try this. I haven't tried it yet, but I know it could work. Step, then dot this. And I have the log available. I'm only going to run this when I'm not in the map editor, so it's not going to be annoying. I want to, again, this is only going to be triggered, this one place is going to be triggered if a unit attacks a building. If a unit attacks another unit or is walking, this is not the place that the step is going to be updated. I know it's confusing and I had to use trial and error and this log function to figure this out, but that's where it is. No, there's no way I'm going to sit here and try to trace all this stuff. No way am I going to do that. No way. This is the fast and sure way. You can do it if you want to, but Alright, so again, my notes or my log file is empty. So we can see. What I want to show is that for the warrior, it doesn't go to 30. His default attack sequence is 12 if he will be allowed to fire. And it's actually a ballista in here because it's already done. But I'm going to take a look at this. See, look, 0 through 10, 11, 12, so it goes to 30, but this one's already initialized. Yeah, okay, so I need to, maybe I could use another unit, like another melee unit. It's probably the same thing as the warrior. Like the barbarian, right? Why not? That would probably be a perfect example if I would just make sure it's me because it's an enemy building that I know I can attack it with the barbarian. It should be the same as the warrior.
Thy command.
And before I attack it, I need to clear the log file. And right now you can see it should be logging if attacking and stuff is going on, which it is, by this unit. Any unit, it doesn't discriminate. I don't have a filter here for the unit type. And I'm talking about here, right? There is no filter. It's going to log anything that activates this or triggers this to happen.
With pleasure.
But I'm going to start attacking it now. And see, it stops at 11 and it goes again. So it goes 0 through 11, 0 through 11, 0 through 11. So it's only 12 frames, including 0, or I should say starting from 0 for an attacking sequence. I'm going to remove this now. But all of this was to explain this range check error. This 14 that we assigned to the warrior is greater than 11 because it starts with 0 and it goes to 11, right? 14 is greater than 11 because I didn't yet apply this to the, and this is my other project. Let me open up the correct one so you can see that it's commented out. I did not yet apply the sprite frames, which is this, for working, for attacking, yet to the warrior. And I can just show you right now that it should not, it may still do it because it may not be in sync just yet. If I were to, let me terminate the application. Let me uncomment just that and not worry about the other ones. Alright, let's see what happens. I extended both the siege weapons to have 30 frames allotted for them, the full amount. I didn't initialize the warrior, but also I need to handle every direction. So at least I could leave these out and see if it works. It should work. Yeah, every direction needs to have a certain set amount, which would be set to 30 by default as max anyway. And 30 is the max. If you would look at the source code, I forgot where it is, there are 30 frames max allotted for any unit, for any animation at all. And maybe that's from my image here. Maybe that's where I remember that from. Yeah, it's right here. It's all the way at the bottom. TKM animation loop. Array 1 through 30 of small int. Step. step, right? That's what this all is. It's about the steps that I logged to the log file just not that long ago. Yay, there we go, right? The game starts, and let's see if the warrior finally fires. Oh, I don't have a warrior. Oh yeah, I do, because I changed the sprites to the rogue. Yeah, that's what happened, right? That's what that code was just now. I changed the sprites to the code for when he's firing, at least. When he's walking, it still changed it. I guess because I assigned all the sprites of the warrior to be what the rogue was. And we just say, okay, warrior, inherit whatever the rogue has. Let them have the same hit points and defense and speed and sight, because they're both siege weapons, of course. That makes sense. So yeah, of course it is. But you saw the dart, right? You saw that. He fired the bolt, I mean. I keep calling the dart, but it's the bolt. Finally. So while I'm at it, I'm going to uncomment all of this code. I think I pretty much covered what I wanted to say about it, and I can go ahead and why not at this point. We're ready and we're prepared. We've heard about this, that it starts at 0. Now I can start talking about the death animations, and we can see those arrays. For that, we have to go to the pool. This, as we were looking at, was for the projectile, but now we have to do the actual siege unit sprites themselves. I'm going to just start from top to bottom, so I'm going to go to that constructor that we initialized, the Ballista bolt array, and go to the top of that to here, and these are 2 new arrays. Or I should say 6 new arrays. They're 2D arrays because you'll see soon why it's convenient for them to be 2D arrays, but it's 0 through 8 again for the direction. We're going to use this to convert the TKM direction to a byte. But I had to say short int because I made this -1. But just right here, it goes there. This is all of it. This is the arrays, at least. I have to do something below something that uses them, but I have it here: walk, walk, fire, fire, die, die. Now I need to mention something about the death real quick. When human soldiers die, when they're facing north or they're facing northeast, they're gonna die north. When they're facing east or southeast, they're gonna die east, and so forth. But the siege units have animations for every single direction. And so this was a problem for me when I was making animations. I had to choose one or the other, which one I wanted. Did I want this for when they die northeast and north, or did I want it the other way around? But now with the code, we can allow all frames from all directions. And I'm saying all frames because here, when I was trying to map this to substitute in directly, I had to repeat the same frame over and over and over again. As you can see, this is the only way it made sense that he would release or launch the rocks at the precise time if I were to map it exactly in that 26 frame sequence that the rogue had by default. I know that's a mouthful, but that's why I'm saying all frames, not just the ones that I have to repeat. I can do the full sequence, and these numbers here is the numbers here for work, and that's what I'm talking about. I just assigned 0, and this is an array. Even though it's just one number, it is an array. This is an array of arrays, or a 2D array. But now you can see why, right? For direction, and then it's a sequence of IDs for each frame. This one has a total of 30 frames because he's attacking with a length of 30. And that we established again from res units, which was here, it's 30. And this is 22 and 20 for die and walk. So if I go back, say here, they all have a length of 30, or 22 and 20. Now, for the death, there's 2 things I have to mention that were a little bit unobvious. For some reason, it skips the 0th frame, or the 0th index of the array. It starts with 1, in other words. As you can see up here, I have it start with 2. I wanted to add in the still frame for whatever direction it was dying in, so that in this case let me go up to where north is so we can see the first array. The first one therefore is 8244, it's the still frame, 8244, then all of a sudden it jumps up to 8626, and that would be this. Because I wanted to lose the flag. I have a map called Debug map, and I had slowed down the game speed right at 10 seconds. It's going to be exactly the same it is now because it's stationary. It's going to be the same frame whenever it gets there. It lost the flag as the first frame of death. And we can just take a peek right now that They're not offset at all, and that was a big problem for me when I was doing sprites by hand. And everyone who does sprites by hand, if they don't have a method yet, they're going to have that problem too. And if they want to do what I'm about to show you, when you want to use this in here, where you need to call this from, and I specifically put an AAA here so that you can go back and forth to view the arrays with the procedure that uses this. It's add unit. This is so different in code because I reordered one of the lines. This line right here, if ID is less than 0, then exit. I wanted to put this before this line because this line doesn't need to execute, even though it's just getting one assignment. It's like it's unnecessary, so I reordered that, but you can see here that I did a whole bunch of things. So I called this BBB, so you can search for AAA to go up. I don't know why it didn't go up. It does it sometimes, this IDE. Maybe I click first occurrence, then go back up and down. That way I don't have to keep scrolling up and down to find where they correspond. Oh, and this right here, I assigned ID to equal to 0 to avoid a warning again, just like with the other procedure a little earlier on with projectiles for the sprites for those. But this is all it takes. It was 20, 30, and 22. I just have to put one less to mod it to cycle around. And I say here in a comment, it grows past the array length when attacking units. So even though the sequence only goes to 30, when he's attacking units, it's like as if he's walking. When he's walking, if you would log it to this file, it would go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so forth. It would keep going. It would go past 30, go 40, 50, 60, whatever, how long it takes them to walk. I guess that's a way that the developers use to keep track of him. I think that's just a byte. It's not an integer, so it's not going to get bigger than 256. But this for die, I never seen it go past what I allotted for it in res units, which was 22, as you see here, right? It's just that plus 1. And this is that same for direction for the 2D array to access the sequence for the specific direction in which he's walking. The action is passed in here. I didn't have to go hunt for that, nor for the unit type. See the A unit, this is a case of the A unit. So there was only 2 to consider. Otherwise, the default line of code that was here will be the ID number for the animation. This is not just for soldiers, this is for villagers and the wolf, everybody. But what I was saying just a little while ago, if you wanted to make your own sprites and you wanted to offset them, you would have to do something like this. You would have to come up here and type in some variable here like off x and then offset y and then integer, no, well not integer, single, because these have to be done in decimal. The offsets are very sensitive. I'm just going to copy this one for right now and come down here just to demonstrate. You would have to do this for each direction separately. You would offset the P of X and the P of Y. If you take advantage of res units and do what I said here ahead of time, then you only have to offset all of the frames of animation for a certain action just with one offset. For example, this is what I had for the catapult or for the rogue, that if we could just offset all frames that go in a specific direction for each action type, then it would look like this. It would be a case of statement like this. They don't all just jump up and down. Like this right here was a nightmare because every single one I color coded in this case when I was making my own sprites for this. I color coded so that I could see which frame, how much I needed to increase the top margin or the left margin by. In other words, offset it that way, make it transparent margin to line it up. For example, here I took care of the vertical, but the horizontal is free to go wherever it wants to go. Then here I have them both locked so that it's stationary for the most part. But this is what I'm talking about by individual frame being offset. If you would have to offset each frame individually, then it would look something like this. It's just basically about factoring out. So these are all offset by this. All these that don't have an off XII or off YII offsets inside of this code block here, but they are offset by this. And this is what I mentioned earlier, that it has to be single because it's very sensitive. As you can see, it's so sensitive that 0 0.8. If you make it 0.7, that's like you offset it by 1, not 0.01, but by 1. Sometimes you would have to offset it by the next decimal place, so it would be half. So like if this was 5, then it would be, you would offset it by 19.5. Now this is like by 19.8. And these are actual offsets that I used that worked. This is all for unit die, unit action. Actually, I had a lot of problems with that when I was making my own sprites. That was a nightmare, and I hope no one ever has to do that, and they can avoid doing that if they would just use this constructor here and use the other constructor in the pool unit module, and just make sure that they follow these exact commands. This part right here, as long as this is in sync, and this too, right? This is all the sprites. If you just make all your sprites the same size, and whatever software you're using for sprites, if it animates in those correctly, then you don't have to do this at all, thankfully. You would just have to do something like this, maybe, because if it works for all directions in whatever software you're testing the sprites in, then this would be it. And also pay attention that I initialize these to 0. But back to the pool subroutine, maybe I can test it now. Maybe we can see if the units now look like these units, which they should. They were both rogues, right? We converted the warrior into a rogue, but now we can see that, right? And they're hungry, so we're going to take care of that. That's something we take care of. That just takes a few minutes to take care of that and a few other things. But the big one is going to be the power of the rocks and the ballista bolts. That still has to be done, as well as the sound that when he hits them, when they fire at him, I should say, we don't hear this noise like they're firing at a building, right? That doesn't happen in the original game. The flag is taken care of, so I don't need to add that, because yeah, we keep going down. I'm looking for add unit flag. It's here. Okay, there's nothing here. Of course there isn't, but I'm just saying that in my original attempt, which I can remove now, but this is the line of code that I added in, that if it's a warrior, make the unit type a bowman, because the unit type is not passed anymore beyond this point. And it's only passed here for the walk arm or for the leader flag. So this was not necessary anymore. I can just remove that actually. Save this other project I have that I didn't need to do that. Because again, the warrior has the flag of the ranged unit, because it inherited all of the rogue's characteristics, its sprites at least, from this command here. Now we can just say this itself without the dot is equal to this, to assign everything about the warrior to the rogue. That's going to cause some problems, at least from my experience. But that's not really necessary, right? These are the only characteristics we really care about, and what it looks like. We're manhandling everything else as far as projectiles are concerned and the attacks, and we're going to get to the delay of attacks too, or resume it I should say, soon enough. But at this point we can go back to Unit Warrior and change these numbers to see what happens. Right now I want to just show that when it releases the balls, we actually control that from what I just showed you. So it looks good here. Of course it does. This was the final result. But let's say that for the catapult, which is the rogue, we were to release a significant amount earlier, like 14 instead of 24. See? It came off way too early, very prematurely. Okay, I undid that. In a way it's confusing because we see a sheet like this that only has 21, because we start with 0, 21 different frames for firing, but we have 30 frames that are allotted to it. So the way I did that was I have to show this, that from, let's say from the original game's videos, I have some clips of them working or firing too. Like if we pay attention to firing north, because we're looking at north, firing north, and I hold down control and arrow the left key. Right now you can see the progress bar. He's just sitting there. I mean, he is sitting there for a long time, and then every single frame after that you can see that an animation change. But then there's a certain point when he's going to, before that point, right now, he's going to sit there for a long time. A very long time. Like I hold it, wow, right? So there's 2 points at which he's resting a lot, and at rest is when it's the wow one. The other one is at 10, I believe. So for north, is this one repeated? Let me go to my arrays to verify which one it is. I have to go to pool, and I have to search for AAA to go back up to it. Go to work for Catapult. Come back here. Is it 801? That's repeated when it's facing north. That's the first one. Yeah, it is. This one's repeated 3 times. But the one that's at rest, which is 8012, that one's repeated this many times. It's repeated like 8 times. That's what I chose to do. I counted how many frames from the original game that at rest was for both points, both pivots, you could say. And one was almost 3 times, like 2.5 times as long as the other one. That's pretty closely what I did here. And I wanted to have 30 because there was a total of like 42 frames or something. I could have extended it more and res units perhaps over here because I have direct control over that, but maybe not. I'm not positive. I didn't really test, but maybe not because of this animation loop type that it goes just 1 through 30. 30 is probably the max. That's what I figured, and that's why I chose just to make it proportional to 30, what it would be. So in pool, I have them spaced out like that for all of the work in all directions for both siege units. Now for the Ballista, it's different. The Ballista fires at a different time. So when it's at rest, instead of it being 10 frames or 11 frames, whatever it was for the Catapult, you can see they're at rest and then in release. And then 11 is actually the second time it rests. But again, it's not as long as when it's at rest. It's kind of ironic though that the Ballista's at rest when it has potential energy to fire its weapon. But the Catapult's the opposite way. It doesn't have any potential energy and it's at rest because it walks that way. And same for the Ballista. It's at rest because it walks that way with potential energy, and Catapult without it. Interesting, but that's how they made it in the original game, so that's how we're going to do it. But with these arrays, you can therefore change it however you want and then change the release accordingly. I'm trying to wrap up this video because it is taking a while. What I want to do now is we can look at the time in which the Catapult fires. He released it at 27 seconds. Releases again at 31 seconds. That's every 4 seconds he fires. But in the original game, let's take a look at the Ballista.
Get rid of them.
When he struggles, that's what I'm talking about. When he struggles, there's a delay. And so I wanted to mimic that in the remake to make it fair, because what you saw in the demonstration in the beginning,
Your troops are being
they're already powerful enough the way they are. But as I showed here with the Single Catapult, with several shots sometimes, the Catapult does not kill units. It's not a one-shot kill. But combined together, they're that powerful, and therefore I made the decision to kind of average out the aiming delay. We saw in the original game, the delay is about 4 seconds. When they fire at a unit and they've got a good aim, but then they delay for 10 seconds when they struggle. 7 would be the average of that, and I just made it 8 to increase that delay a little bit more. And considering that if you want to convert the original game's tick time into the remake's tick time, which is real time, the original game ticked a little slower. For example, if you're doing a speedrun video recording of a map in the Steam version, you would have to multiply the real time of that video by 0.92 in order to get the in-game time shown in the Steam version. And I have a video on that in my speedrun playlist. I have the video unlisted so you don't see here. This is all you see, it's not even my video. But if we come here, how to convert times to IGT. Now I'm going to multiply this by 0.92. This is how much slower the Knights and Merchants clock is than a real clock. So if I say 0.92 and I take the inverse of that and I times it by 7, then this is the average of the delays in the original game if we were to make it real time, and that's closer to 8 seconds. I'll come back to this now, that we want to kind of mimic that. And when I increase this to 25 and this to 25 and let this be for both siege weapons, then it's going to be more of a delay. Now, this is not for attacking buildings per se, that's something separate, but we're going to see this when they attack units. We're going to see more of a delay from when they fire. So I'm going to pay attention to when they either release their projectile, I guess, right here, 15 seconds even. Instead of 19 now, it's at 23. So it's equivalent, or very close, I should say, to that delay when they struggle, but you don't see that annoying struggle. That way it kind of makes it more fair and more balanced. That's why I did it that way, increase that amount, what's called aiming delay, to make that happen. But right now when they fire a building, we'll see. At least is at 101. There's a 109. So it's 8 seconds. It's the same amount as if he's firing at a unit. But in the original game, there was no struggle when they're firing at a building. They're fixed on it. 1, 2. You saw it was about 4 seconds. And so I'm going to show you how to adjust that real quick, where you do that. But this is set now. This is all done. I'm going to label this change as unit specs because how fast they can fire. It is part of their power, and that one I have commented it there already, that I commented it out. Speaking of attack house, that's right here. Let's go up a little bit. Calculate aiming delay. Alright, I'm going to comment this out and add this in instead. So if the unit type is a siege unit, then we're going to delay 21 frames, I guess, or 21 ticks, whatever it is. I experimented, so that's why I'm guessing. I don't know. But if it's not a siege unit, then just choose what was automatically the default. I don't want to change the behavior of the bowman or the crossbowman. Don't want to do it, and I didn't, right? That's showing it right there. Anything I do, I'm very careful to make sure it's in siege units or whatever. You can see that. Everything I did not change those units. Now when he fires at a building, we'll see when he releases it. It was about 10 seconds, 15, so it was a little bit more than 10, so yeah, that's about right. It's about every 4 seconds. For both of them, they're exact same thing. That was 23 seconds. 28. It might be a little bit slower, like 5 seconds instead of 4. But this guy is going to take off 12 hit points from the building, and this one's going to take off 4. It might be actually close enough. I think it's a little bit slower than them, but that's where I think it's going to be good for balance. But we can change that, right? It's easy to change that. You know where. You would choose something else. Something that a player like me would exploit. Okay, he just fires. I halted him. There he goes. He fires again. Right? You can exploit this, and it will hurt them. I mean, right now you can't see the effects because we didn't increase the power of the rocks yet. That might be a blast on my list for this video. But yeah, okay, so we have to avoid that. How do we do that? Well, the developers mentioned it here. Prevent rate of fire exploit for pause. But that's for building, but not for units. And for siege units, I think I wanted to be a little bit more strict actually. I have to go back to Unit Warrior and come up and find enemy. Here it is. Right here. But I saw this code somewhere else. I think it's in the procedure below. Okay, it's here. It's cycle. You see, that's the thing. 724. The developers had this here for rate of exploit. The same exact way. Set action fight. It wasn't enough for the siege units, as you could see. Based on how they're set up, it wasn't enough. We could still exploit them. Even though they have something in there, I don't have a filter that siege units only. This will be a safety for them too. But I think I do need to add it in actually. I need to add in a filter here because this is the cycle. But we established the cycle in res units here, especially for the Ballista. It needs to be changed because by default it's 12, 0 through 11 instead of 0 through 30. So Unit Warrior, that needs to be in place of cycle here. But really what needs to be in place of cycle, because this is just firing, it's what I did up here. That's what this 30 is. It represents this 30 here that we established. This is the cycle. If we would say .count, this is the cycle. We're assigning it here because this is a constructor that's run at the beginning of the game, but then it becomes an uneditable property, I believe, when the game goes on. That's why we can establish it here at the beginning when the game loads. So I put that safety there, but I need to put it down here for the siege units because we don't have that cycle. We cannot, it'll be the wrong amount for lowering it. Let me find it with control find. There's only 2 occurrences of it in the whole thing. I'm probably going to have to, make a case of, yeah, self dot, so self is the unit, but unit type is here too. So I can access the unit type directly. I don't need to do self dot unit type of, unit type bowman. I mean, we could do ranged. Maybe I should. What I'll do is, if this is ranged, then, because someone might change another unit to be ranged. If ranged, then begin. If in siege units, then begin. And else begin. If this, then exit. That was for my siege units. And I'll put my comment above that line. Okay, I took care of that. Everything's back. The cycle can stay, and the step equals 0 can stay, but I'm going to comment this out because I want to make clear what is new. And we're not going to exit. We're going to do the same command. Actually, my bad. Then this. And it won't be cycle, it will be 30. We have to hard code this in because we hard coded this ourselves in res units. We can't let this calculation up here affect us, but it needs to. I shouldn't have overwritten it just yet. I need to keep that for here for the bowman and crossbowman and whatever non-sieged range unit that makes sense. That should secure it because I do think I recall them firing at units still. Even though it was from a fight. Yeah, when they died. That was what it was. When a unit died and they halted because the unit died, not that you halted them, the siege units would fire prematurely. And it's not because there wasn't a filter here for ranged units, because there was, but cycle for the ballista especially would be 12 instead of 30. So we have to hard code it in for the ballista and also for the catapult. Alright, let's test this out. We're gonna halt him. Why? I have to select him. He is player 13. I'm a little bit forward. I mean, he has a longer range already. We extended the range more than a normal ranged unit. Okay, I halted him just now. Doesn't matter, right? Look at that. And that's what we want. We want to make this fair. It costs 30 gold each. Maybe we need to increase that to make it more fair. I don't know. But I think it's a reasonable amount because there's only so many you can make for a shorter piece time. This is an edit. I noticed that, yes, it was good to filter out siege units and to do something if it was a siege unit. But there was two problems with this. Number one, as you may have noticed, I had cycle up here after step equals 0, but it only should be assigned if it's a ranged unit that's not a siege unit. And I didn't have this if at all, which depends on that in order to carry out this action. So that was the problem. I didn't preserve the original code for the bowman and the crossbowman. So in short, this is a fix for that. And you can see this in the source code here, just in case, but this was another one of my few mistakes that I made, and I addressed it here. Okay, this second to last section hopefully is about changing the condition bar that it doesn't behave like a normal unit. It's not going to starve. As of right now, I don't know if they're going to win this fight because they're not very powerful. Those knights is probably going to kill everybody. But I can maybe save him and times it by 300. You can see the health dropping. He's going to get hungry and die, just like normal. But before I do that, let me do something else. I have 2 lines of script code that I can run in one of my test maps to create one of each group, just to see that these siege units can now be created with the script, just as the warrior and the rogue could. 15 each, 4 columns for each of the siege weapons. The script generates them, but they don't generate them at max health. So let me do that next before I prevent the health from dropping. I initially made changes that the town hall and scripts are going to create the rogue and the warrior at max health, but if we just update it with on tick, which is going to decrease their health by 1 every tick, when they're full it's 2700. If we stop that from happening and set them to be max health every tick instead, then we don't have to worry about setting max health when they get trained from the town hall or when they get created from a script. On tick is going to automatically change that right away. So that just saves us to having to edit just one part to tackle this. All we have to do is open up KaM units, and then it's this line right here. So the new code will be this. I'm going to categorize this as siege unit health. I'm going to have a few more things that I'm going to change. That's going to be in this category. This is the original line of code, same exact line, so I'm going to comment this out, I guess. F type is the unit type, and I got that from just seeing that F action is here, and then I control F, not control shift F, just control F to find it at the top, and I click this to go there, and then it says TKM unit type for F type. If it's not a siege unit, then do the original line of code. Otherwise, do this, where the hunger bar is going to be reflecting their hit points rather than their hunger level. It's just a fraction, where this is the max number of hit points for the unit, and this is their current hit points. Because otherwise I would just not have anything. If it's not in that, then I would just say then this and then put a semicolon at the end of this here, and that would be the end of it. But if I want to mimic this, where if they get injured, you can see they only have 2 hit points now because the warrior, right? The warrior used to have 4 hit points, but now he only has 2. And the rogue now has 2 and it used to have 1. So when they get hit, you can see halfway, but then that's it. Either that they die or it goes back to 100%. But at least it's better than just being 100% all the time. It doesn't hurt anything. It's a specific type of unit that shouldn't be fed. But, well, will it be fed? That's the thing. We're going to check out that next. Let's just see that this works. They never get hungry, no matter what health they start with. And from the map editor, if you set them at whatever hunger level, they should go to 100% just in a few seconds, if not within a second, because their hit points will be at 100%. That kind of saves map makers the trouble of having to worry about putting them at 100% to look good. They're going to look fine. But anyway, I'm going to move him over there and see if he ever gets hungry, and he doesn't. And we can take a look at, let's say, this one, and when he gets hit, we can see the health bar go down when he gets hit. I'm slowing it down. There we go. Now I'm going to play this test map. He got injured. Let me chow tie him and see if he gets fed. He's going to go get the food. So we want to prevent that. If you just search for the keyword, so Control-Shift-F, order some food for troops like this verbatim, you'll find 2 occurrences of it. One, this is when the warrior himself orders the food. So I'm going to first do this one, that this is a response to us when we order the group to eat. And I'll verify that. I'm going to just comment this out and put in this code here. This line of code is the same. All I did was add in this line here, and I can maybe put then down here instead to make things cleaner, and put an if capital, and just for my style, little test when he gets injured to see if the server is going to come feed him. But I need to have a non-siege unit be hungry, and I should say warrior be hungry, to see if I can feed him. Just Control-Shift to make it fast and quick play it after saving it, of course. Nothing happens with the serfs. But him, hello. Okay, so that's one. If I go search for this again with Control-Shift-F, this was unit group, now unit warrior. Just gonna comment this all out and put this instead. And I have in lowercase whatever, and I'll put this comment. Okay. This was a separate condition of an AND statement. Actually, it was an AND statement, so I put that on one line. I only added this in right here. I can just put this right here. Let's just see that it compiles. It should. I mean, I only added that one condition, and we're just saying that it's not a siege unit. Then we allow it to call for a serf to feed it. So this is probably for the AI. It's gotta be. And that's it for this step. I changed most of the code in here. If you want to compare with the original code, you have to just go look at the original code for this procedure, because yeah, it was just too much. It was a mess. I just removed it all and just refactored things. They had everything grouped together, all the projectiles for the bowman, crossbowman, and the rogue, and I kind of changed that code a little bit. They had if f-type equals arrow, and then if f-type equals this, and if f-type equals that. But I just have an else if, because that's a little bit more efficient. But I didn't change anything with this code. Basically, this line of code here says if the projectile, which is invisible, we're not talking about the sprite, if the projectile has reached the target, and it says that in the comments here, then we handle the bowman and crossbowman. So you can go compare this code block with the original code and see that it didn't really change anything when it comes down to it. And therefore, I move on. I just added the case of for Ballista bolt. Here, the case of is for the arrow and the projectile bolt. Guess I should have the sling rock too. I forgot that. I'm glad looking at this a second time. Not that it's gonna matter, because the sling rock should not be called with this mod anyway. And this was my comments here. So I'm going to go down to the Ballista. Very small amount of code compared to the Catapult. And then the watchtowers on the bottom. If you compare the watchtower's code here with the one in the original code, I didn't change anything. I just made it a lot cleaner looking. I guess I could put this to be consistent. If the Ballista bolt has reached some unit, and the unit is not dying, and it's visible, and it's not an animal, if the unit is an enemy and only if it's an enemy. Because up here in the original code, they have friendly fire, which I assume is a constant that we can search for. Yeah, I think it would be in KaM defaults. Yeah, it says you can kill fellow men with their arrows, and it's set to true right now. I didn't even have to go to it. It says it right here. But I'm not going to allow that. But the remake has always had friendly fire, that your units die to other units' arrows. But I just thought that for siege weapons, because they're so powerful, that I don't want to harm your own or your friends' units with them. I don't want to treat this like Age of Empires or something like that. But we can of course change it. All we have to do is add in this check here, friendly fire, and an or statement with this, just like they have it. So if we've gotten this far, then we're going to take off 4 hit points. Basically, since the knights and barbarians have the most hit points, which is 4, that will be almost an instant kill for any unit. Sometimes maybe the hit points will regenerate, that if it takes off 1, maybe it'll get 1 hit point back and stay alive. Or with the settings we set here for projectile predict jitter, like this, I set it to 3 so that the ballista is a little bit less accurate. If this is not the case, for example, or this is not the case, or this is not the case, or this is not the case, check for if it's a house, just like how they have in the original code here. You can't damage a house and a unit at the same time because it's going to be located on one tile, so therefore if it's not the unit, then it's the house. Check if there's a house at the coordinate. If there is a house and it's an enemy's house, add 4 hit points of damage to it. Only 1 ballista bolt is going to be fired by the ballista. Therefore the ballista is only going to cause 4 hit point damage to a building with 1 hit. If we go to any map and put a tower on it and start to take off hit points from it, when does it start burning at the 2nd degree? Assuming that the remake developers mimic the original game exactly, which they probably matched it just fine. 32 hit points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 32 divided by 8 hits is 4 hit points for the ballista, which is what I have here, right? That's why I did that. And then when we play the projectile hitting sound, which we heard earlier, let's open up sound. KaM sounds, that will be in media, sound. I'm going to Control F and search for .play. The one that I have here has 4 arguments, where the second to last one is a boolean and the last one is an integer. That can't be it, that can't be it, that can't be it. I'm looking at those arguments there. This looks like one, and it says it right here, wrapper for sound effects. If we go to res sound, that's what this set is called, that we saw the sounds earlier, and so this is the one. Attenuated doesn't seem to make any difference whether it's true or false, at least for our purposes here, with these sound files at least. So I had to pass something for it because I wanted to use the volume. That's the main thing. So I had to pass something for this in order to access the volume. As it says here, it's equal to 1 by default. That's 100% volume. But it's so loud when they hit buildings. That sound is really loud that I made it just 50% to be less annoying. Imagine people playing this and they have to turn down the volume of the game because of that, to not disturb their family members and whoever. Alright, that's the end of the ballista. I'm going to come down to the catapult. It's a little bit different. I programmed this one that it's going to damage houses and unit, because each rock out of the 3 is going to damage units around it. And if by chance the rock hits a building, that's its target, but the units around the building are enemy units, then it's going to harm them too. I wanted to give them more power and make it more logical, because the ballista bolt is more focused on one target, but the rocks are 3 rocks, so they can hit multiple targets at one time. So if there is a house on the target target that the rock actually reaches. Then, if that house is owned by an enemy, take away 4 hit points from that building and play the sound. Each rock is going to pass through this procedure. Since there are 3 rocks, it can be up to 12 hit point damage. 1, 2, 3. Just 3 hits. 32 divided by 3. For the catapult, it's 10, almost 11. It's just a wild guess, but I think each catapult rock takes off 4 hit points, just as I have it in the source code here, because 12 times 3 is 36, which is more than 32. I'm thinking the original game developers probably just made each siege weapon projectile have the same kind of damage to a building. That seems to be a logical assumption. So even though this is only around 11 instead of 12, I assumed that, and that's why. And again, I'm going to play the sound when it hits the building at 50% volume. Okay, now for units, this is all that's left because this is the watchtower. So this is the same exact function from utilities. I just replaced this with that, and it's the same chances. It's just the string name is different than this, but now I made it the same because in the scripting utils it was this as the name, but everything else it was wrapped within these keywords and all wrapped within this text and KaM random in the same way. So it's going to choose a number between 1 and 3, and if that is greater than 1, so that means 2/3 of the time this is going to execute. So only 1/3 of the time it's going to quit. No damage will be done. This entire if is, as you can see with this green line here, let me alternate click it, is not going to be executed 1/3 of the time. So no damage will be done to any units. 2/3 of the time, up to 3 units are going to be harmed. So as it says here, that's the number of units that are going to be harmed. It's based on chance. And as we saw earlier, in 2 different places, one catapult will kill anywhere from 0 to 4 units. And oftentimes it doesn't kill any. So it's very close to the original game. The original game, I know they killed up to 3. I don't remember them killing 4. They only kill 4 once in a while. But they killed units overall maybe less often than what one catapult would in the original game. So it kind of balances out, but it's still very close with the simple algorithm I have here. If there is a unit here, or let's say there was a unit here or there, whatever, then it'll be 3 units. But if there's only these 2 units, or maybe it's just these 2 units that the target unit died or is dying. But if it makes it this far and it's a unit in any of these 9 squares, an important thing is that the offsets start with 0, 0. So it's going to focus on the unit that it was aiming to target and then work from there. If that unit is dying or for some reason not there, then it's going to search the remaining squares around here. I didn't apply an array shuffler to shuffle these offsets to make it random which unit it chooses. So it's just going to choose the same exact units around the same. It's going to prioritize. It's going to choose first -1, -1. So as you can see in the top left, for those who are not familiar with the map editor very much, or coordinates or scripting, when you go like this, they both decrease. The y-axis is opposite of what it is in math, but the x-axis behaves just like it does in math. But you can think of the y-axis behaving just like it does in Microsoft Excel. The row numbers increase as you go down. But anyway, that means that this is -1, -1. So this is the first one that it's going to prioritize to search for if there's a unit there and take off 2 hit points for should a unit not be here. But even if a unit is here, it's going to harm at least 2 units. If it's going to harm any at all, it's going to harm at least 2 units. So it's going to harm this one and this one. But if these 2 don't exist, just one more example, then it's going to go 0, -1. So it's not going to go anywhere for X, but for Y it's going to go here. So this is next, and so forth. But anyway, obviously there's the same filters for if it's not a unit or it's dying or if it's not visible. And if it's not an animal, then don't continue. Or if it's not an enemy unit, don't continue. Then take off 2 hit points. And for each unit that we harm, we're going to decrease this counter. So it's going to start with 3 and it's going to decrease. And then once the number of units harmed gets to 0, that means we've harmed the number of units that we are allowed to harm. Most of the time, it'll never get this far. It's going to loop all the way through and it's never going to get there, but it's going to terminate. The for loop is going to terminate based off of just going through all the offsets and not finding enough units in this block of 9 squares. So the big thing about this is it's going to damage a building if it happens to be at the target tile, which in other words is here in the middle, no matter what. And in addition, it's going to harm any units around it. I know it's kind of redundant to search for 0, 0 where it's not possible for a unit to be there should a building have been damaged. A building be there. But to add another if check, it's equivalent to if we just have this and it just loops to this array anyway. It's just one argument in the array to loop through. So it really makes no difference as far as I can tell. But that pretty much sums this up. And as for a test, you can just see the demonstrations in the very beginning of the video. Alright, this is the last section that I added at the end. This is, I guess I'm going to call this CMOLA map creation or just map creation. I just put CMOLA as a signature for me, but basically this function right here is called from the map editor. When the map editor loads a map, all the units that are placed on the map come through here, and the last parameter that it takes is going to be set to true by default. And so we're going to add two new scripting functions, actions.give_group and actions.give_group_ex. And when they call this, which they will, as we can see here, like with give group ex, and therefore you can add another parameter just like we did with the volume that we added false and then the volume at the end. We can add another parameter. So for actions.give_group, you just rename it to give_group there, and there we have to have this inside, and then you just pass false as the last argument. And the same with the EX version. We need to have that it's in C's unit set. Rename it here, rename it there, and pass false as the last argument when you want to call add unit group that's in KMHand. All this means is whenever there's a rogue or a warrior that is on a map or is created by the normal give group or give group ex KaM scripting functions, they're going to be converted to a bowman and barbarian respectively. That way it can maintain old map integrity. And as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, you can open up the same map with two different game versions and get two different things, but yet not conflict at all. If I come up here in the same module, you just copy these, paste them here, and rename them here and here. Then over here in this module, you copy these two. It's the same thing, and then you rename them here and here. They take the exact same parameters. And then down here, you make a copy of these, you paste it here, and you're going to rename it here, 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 and here. And that's it. By doing this, we maintain previous map integrity, including their scripts. If their scripts create warriors, it's just going to be barbarians. And if their scripts create rogues, it's going to be bowmen. If there's any existing rogues on the map, they're going to become bowmen. If there's any existing warriors on the map, they're going to become barbarians. Very simple, but yet when you see something like this, it becomes very empowering. To add yourself to the additional credits menu, you just come here, right here, and then just put your username. So that now when you go to the credits menu, it's right here. And I guess the way they have it, it's in alphabetical order, so I'll need to move it to be after Andrews. But yeah, okay, there I go. Then this will be this. Control F4 is to close the page, by the way. Just learned that. And one final thing is the remake revision. It's good to distinguish this one from that one without losing their number. So if you just go to the main project folder, it's called KaM Remake Revision. But you have to make sure you have any file selected. You might have, if you're using Delphi 12, you're going to have like this one selected at first. But any file, and then right here. I just tagged on a 0. That's all I did. That way, when the user attempts to watch a replay that is made from this mod, then it's going to do this, just like normal. Hopefully they won't ever have to have that many revisions that they're going to need another 0. But even if it is in the future, it's very unlikely that it's going to be the exact same number if it gets to over 100,000. You see, it won't let you play it. Oh, and that too. Oh, for those who have made it this far, I've learned something, and I hope that it's the beginning of a journey for you to make your own version of the remake. Alright, thank you for watching, and have a nice day.